Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back after the lunch break. Welcome back to the International High-Level Forum on the ATLAS launch. And I hope you enjoyed your lunch break and got to the opportunity to continue your exchanges and contact with your partners and colleagues. Once again, my name is Sinead Harvey. I work in the IAEA, and it's my pleasure to act as MC this afternoon, and I'll be the moderator for tomorrow's session as well here. This morning's discussions highlighted the growing international interest in nuclear applications at sea and demonstrated strong support for international cooperation in this area. During this afternoon's programme, we will explore the opportunities, challenges and practical pathways associated with the deployment of nuclear technologies in the maritime sector. Our discussions will be organised around 3 panel sessions, addressing why interest in maritime nuclear applications is growing, what enabling frameworks will be required, and how ATLAS can support practical implementation. So let us begin with our first panel. Our first panel explores the fundamental question, why nuclear maritime now? Demand, opportunity and strategic drivers. This discussion is intended to cover why maritime nuclear applications are attracting serious attention at this particular moment. I'd like to welcome them all to the stage now, please. And I'm particularly pleased to welcome our moderator, Mr. Chimi Zekot, Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Reactors in the United States Department of Energy. Chimi oversees programs supporting the development and deployment of advanced nuclear technologies. A former US Navy submarine contractor with extensive experience in naval nuclear propulsion, reactor oversight and nuclear workforce development, he has also advised senior US government leadership on nuclear energy, nuclear security and maritime initiatives. His experience spans across technology development, operations and policy. Chimi, the floor is yours to moderate this panel.
Thank you. Hey, so what a great day for nuclear power. What a promising day for maritime nuclear programs. Earlier today we witnessed a call to action by Director General Grossi and Secretary Wright. Call for collaboration. Just as a rising tide will lift all boats, collaboration between industries, international maritime and technical organizations, and collaboration between industries has the potential to uplift us all globally. To make maritime nuclear more abundant, more reliable, and more cost-effective, all while maintaining the high standards for safeguards, safety and security that we all should demand from nuclear power. This panel and the ones that follow put that thought to call and explore opportunities, challenges, and pathways associated with civil nuclear applications at sea. This first panel asks why maritime nuclear is attracting so much attention. The focus on the strategic rationale and real-world demand, why governments, industry leaders, maritime operators, and energy customers and international organizations are all spending so much time and resources in this area. What are the needs, what are the opportunities, and what are the factors that are making the discussion increasingly relevant? We're blessed today to have an exceptional panel of industry leaders, academics, policy deciders who bring a variety of perspectives and deep understanding to this discussion. Before we get the panel underway, I would like to briefly introduce each panelist and invite them to offer a few opening remarks before we delve into the discussion. Our first panelist, we're pleased to welcome David Cardero, Vice President of Global Supply Chain and Transportation Procurement at Amazon. Amazon is one of the world's top retailers and cargo buyers. Amazon operates a global logistics and transportation network that moves millions of tons of cargo globally and annually. David's perspective will help us understand how cargo buyers are evaluating new energy options, including nuclear propulsion to meet commercial shipping needs for reliable, scalable, and cost-effective needs. David, from your perspective, why is maritime nuclear attracting so much attention today?
Hi, thank you for the question. I appreciate that, and thank you for having me. Right now, from our perspective as a large global cargo buyer, the reason nuclear is attracting our attention is maritime is one of the hardest sectors to abate in terms of emissions. And there is a tremendous opportunity we see with the nuclear maritime industry capabilities to get to net zero carbon, which is a commitment that Amazon has made to 2040, carbon emission neutrality. And there's really no other avenue we see currently that is going to deliver that for us in the maritime industry. We also see, and this is really one of the larger attractants to this, is the opportunity to operate a more efficient and fast ocean network. The reality is we see through some of the things that have been shared with us, the ability for these vessels to operate at higher speeds, which ultimately allows greater efficiencies within the supply chain, and that's very exciting for us.
Perfect, thank you. Stephanie Hirma is Allseas Manager Nuclear, a global offshore construction and maritime engineering company. Allseas operates at the intersection of energy, infrastructure, and maritime operations. In addition to extensive maritime activities, Allseas is developing an advanced nuclear energy technologies for both onshore and maritime applications. Stephanie heads the nuclear operations and offers insight into offshore industry needs, the practical challenges, and technology advancement while supporting maritime uses for nuclear energy. Stephanie, can you share some thoughts on why this is so important?
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, so as a global maritime player, we struggle to actually decarbonize our vessels, so to lower our emissions. And for years, we've been looking into alternative fuels like methanol, ammoniac, and such. But we figured that it was actually limiting us in various ways. So it's more costly, it's not abundant, and also requires more frequent bunkering, which is very limiting if you're spending a lot of time offshore. And that's the moment where we started looking into SMRs and learned very quickly that this may actually change the maritime industry as we know it. So this will really enable us to, be more independent offshore, but also increase productivity, like was mentioned before. So with that vision, we went out to the market and looked for a design that would fit our purposes and also our operational requirements. Then learned that that was not available, and that's where we decided to do it ourselves. So we're now both developer and end user, and we're looking at a market of about 700 vessels for our type of reactor. So instead of sort of waiting for this to happen, we decided to actually do it, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. Virginia Crosby is Chief Executive Officer of Nuclear Energy Maritime Organization, or NEMO. NEMO is an international member organization for the maritime nuclear sector. NEMO brings together stakeholders across maritime and nuclear industries to support safe, secure, and commercially viable deployment of civil maritime nuclear applications. Her perspective provides insight into the industry's trends, stakeholder priorities, and growing international interest in maritime nuclear technologies. Virginia, your thoughts?
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you for the invitation. I think it's first to highlight this is not necessarily about the technology. We've had the technology. We've proven. There's been a lot of talk about the NS Savannah today, and I hope lots of you are going on the tour tomorrow. There's been a lot of talk about icebreakers and naval applications. This is a lot about demand. The numbers have been mentioned over the last couple of days that 80% of the world's goods travel by sea. But what's not really been highlighted is that this is due to double by 2050. Now, I'm a scientist, I'm a mathematician. If it's doubling by 2050, that's a compound annual growth rate of 3% a year. The demand is going to be absolutely phenomenal. And then it's also the maths behind container ships. They're built to travel on average of around 26 knots, but they're traveling at 17 knots on average. Why? Because of the cost of fuel. And also ports. A lot of discussions about ports, and we had an example from the Port of Seattle yesterday. Their current demand is 50 megawatts, and they've got that forecast to go to 250 megawatts by 2040. This is not that far away. So we're seeing significant demand, and that's leading to necessity, which is real customer problems, and they're looking for solutions to actually solve these problems. And leadership. I think we can't not include leadership in this conversation. Government leadership, we've seen a stepwise change in the US here, and actually somebody mentioned me today that actually the initiatives we've had from President Trump in terms of the renaissance in the nuclear sector almost outstrips what we had with President Eisenhower in his Atoms for Peace initiative. So we had that leadership, we've had the likes of MARAD with their RFI for SMRs, and the plethora of MOUs that have been signed between the likes of MARAD and ports, and government organizations really working together. And we have to talk about capability, the range of reactors, and the increase in options. That means we can target propulsion, FMPPs, and offshore industries. And that leads us to really the last few days in ATLAS. It's the right people. It's ensuring that we've got the right people in the room, and not only that we've got the right people having the right conversations.
Thank you, Virginia. Jan Embelsvåg is a professor at Norwegian University of Science and Technology. He's also the director of the SFI Saint Research Project. His work focused on maritime systems, innovations, and strategic assessment of future technologies. He brings an analytical and research-based perspective on long-term market trends and strategic drivers. Some thoughts, please?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll try just to convey one right now. And a lot of ship owners have looked for alternatives for the last 15 years, exploring, slower speed, LNG, green alternative fuels. And if you look at the green alternative fuels, if you look at the numbers, if you take everything out there on the high seas that is ship-like, like drill ships, but also conventional ships and all kind of those things, they consume about 400 million tons of fossil fuel. It has a density of about 11 megawatt hours per ton. If we were to replace this with green ammonia, it has only 5.2 or 3 megawatt hours per ton, which means we would need twice the amount of fuel to do the same job in the global trading system. But green ammonia requires about 12 megawatt hours per ton in production. And when you combine these numbers, you get a very depressing number. You get 10,000 terawatt hours of electricity would be required, which means this would be in the darkness. It's almost all the power in all of the OECD countries combined, which has brought me to the very simple conclusion that either we do this correctly, or this will be our industry in fossil fuels. It's that simple, like it or not.
I really like that phrase, doing this correctly. So thank you for that. Justice Wabiabo is the Chief Executive Officer of Kenya's Nuclear Power and Energy Agency. This organization is responsible for promoting and implementing Kenya's nuclear power program. He's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with over 25 years of experience and has background in legal, regulatory, and corporate governance matters. He brings a national program implementation program perspective to nuclear energy development, with particular focus on institutional and strategic foundation needed to support the deployment. Sir, can you provide some thoughts on your experience?
Thank you very much. First, let me take this opportunity to thank IAEA and the government of the United States of America for organizing this event. It's a very important event. Obviously, Africa and specifically Kenya is not a strong nuclear region or a strong maritime region, but we are saying that this is the technology of the future, and just like the Stone Age came to an end, when another age is there, you don't spend your time trying to depend on something that is of the past. So Africa, like the rest of the world, wants to focus on the right technology. In Kenya, as has been highlighted, there is usually a lot of activity around the ports, and the way the world is becoming a global village. We also feel that this is the right time to adopt this modern technology so that the people of Africa can also be able to harness this advanced technology for their development. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice. Hey, so the opening theme for this panel is strategic rationale. So let us begin with why maritime nuclear applications matter strategically and why organizations are paying attention. Before delving into specific projects or technologies, it's essential to understand why governments, companies, maritime operators, and international organizations are all interested in nuclear applications at sea. What broader needs and pressures are driving this agenda? So, David, from your perspective as a leading maritime cargo buyer, what trends are driving this concern about the future of energy availability, reliability, and scalability?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As some of the folks mentioned in their opening remarks, I think there's a few things that are getting at this. Number one, as pointed out, and I mentioned around the efficiency of operations. Today, we've got our steamship providers out there, they're moving our goods, but they're ultimately moving those goods at a slower speed. And they're doing that for a couple of reasons. One, yes, it's directly related to the fuel cost. It's also another means for keeping your emissions down. And so as we look at the opportunity that's presented with nuclear use in maritime, we can directly impact those things without actually creating any adverse effects. It looks to be an opportunity where we can have significant certainty in the cost of operation, which means that we can also have significant certainty in prices for our customers. And it's obviously a big part of our mission is to have consistently low prices for our customers and take inefficiency out of supply chains. And so this presents a massive opportunity to take some inefficiency out of the supply chain and create cost certainty, and do that in a way that has zero net carbon impact, direct net zero. There's not many things that present that opportunity across the supply chain. There are also multiple other modes of transportation that actually don't have this opportunity in front of them. So when you look at aviation as an example, that opportunity is not there. And so right now with the alternative fuels that are being used in the maritime industry, those are actually competing with alternative fuels for the aviation industry. So by reducing the draw, if you will, in the maritime industry from these other fuels, can also create certainty for the fuels in other modes of transportation. So those are the big ones for us.
Thank you, David. So, Stephanie, from your perspective, as an offshore maritime operator and developer, what are the strategic challenges that are shaping this interest in new energy solutions?
Sorry, can you repeat that last?
Yeah. So, what are the strategic challenges that are shaping this interest for all?
Yeah. So that's a good one. So early in our process, we figured that the speed of this development is only going to be determined by the regulations and the regulatory landscape to be shaped. And luckily, within the IMO, progress is made, and we've been looking out for this day for a while. So we're very happy that this program is being launched, because obviously we need the regulations to be in place in order to realize this. So one of our solutions to that is to also deploy on land. So our first reactor will be on land, and we aim to build that in 2030. And then hopefully from 2032 onwards, we can also deploy offshore. So I think that's, in terms of where is the risk, it's mostly in the regulations, because we realize very well that there are some, topics that will be challenging, and today has been, in that sense, very much assuring, because I think there's a lot of willingness and there's a lot of countries really behind this. So in that sense, we're positive, but it's going to be a challenge, and we need some, proactivity and constructivity in the conversations.
Thank you. So you mentioned the operational challenge. How do you anticipate that challenge is going to morph or evolve over the next few years?
So from the operational side, so what we do is we speak a lot with boards. We speak with various regulators to also early on explain, so what does a reactor operating company with a ship coming into port need in terms of infrastructure, and also we hope to help them by providing information on our safety case, on our source term, etc., so that we can get the conversations as sort of real as possible. And so that's, so from an operational perspective, I think it needs to become clear to all the stakeholders involved what is actually needed.
Perfect, thank you. So Virginia, from your engagements with maritime and nuclear stakeholders, what strategic themes do you find coming up in conversations most often?
Yeah, excellent question, Jimmy. I would say, being CEO of NEMO, Nuclear Energy Maritime Organization, I've got the best job in the world. Why? Because everybody wants NEMO to succeed. And the way we work, we're an NGO, we're technology agnostic, and we've got consultative status with the IMO and a special relationship with the IAEA. And we act as the bridge between the maritime and the shipping, the nuclear sector, and also the regulators. And you're talking about stakeholders here. Our members, we've got so many members here in the room, but they really, transcend from classification societies, P&I clubs. We've got reactor developers, ship operators, ports, a whole range across the sector. And what we're hearing from stakeholders really is this demand. Is this demand in the sector? It's demand in the shipping sector. It's demand in ports. It's demand from the sort of offshore industrial projects. But we're also seeing capability in terms of the reactor designs and the reactor programs. And we're seeing the stakeholders are asking the questions. They're asking those practical questions. And when you see stakeholders ask those practical questions, you are seeing an industry develop. So we are seeing the formation of an industry that is being created, that market is being created. There's a lot of talk about energy security, industrial competitiveness, and decarbonization. But they all really reinforce each other. Those three things reinforce each other. That energy security, that determines competitiveness, and then the competitiveness determines the investment. And I think it's critical to highlight how decarbonization, that's changing energy choices. It's changing energy choices for both governments and for industries. And we're seeing a convergence. We're seeing convergence of this demand. We're seeing convergence of this energy security, of decarbonization. It's all coming together. And it's really bringing us back to why ATLAS really matters.
Thank you, Virginia. So Jan, from the research and strategic perspective, what are the signals that you're seeing suggest that maritime nuclear applications is becoming really much more serious?
Becoming really?
Much more serious.
Well, I think that once people learn that there are a lot of new technologies on the way, a lot of people, they associate, if you ask them on the street, they will, at least in Europe, they will associate this with accidents in the past and so on. But once they learn that there's a lot of new positive things that have happened over the years, I mean, one thing is the reactor designs, but also fuel, such as TRISO fuel, for example. That's one of the things that we focus a lot in our project, simply because the TRISO fuel, as the DOE says on their webpage, the most robust fuel on Earth. It's basically a nuclear chemical fuel, nuclear ceramic fuel that contained a radioactive material. And of course, originally it was developed for proliferation purposes, if I remember correctly. But the point is, this ship will sink. I talked for a whole bunch of insurance lawyers in Geneva the other year, 100 of them. And of course, they are insurance lawyers, they ask critical questions. But the fact that this fuel retires a huge amount of risk, even if the reactor loses cooling, if the ship sinks, it will still retain all these elements. And it's a really, really strong case for environmental risk protection, which makes it possible to have commercial insurance. And this is actually doable. That's the point.
Perfect, thank you. So, as we look forward, we talked about some of the technical enablers, and really appreciate you talking about those technical, developments that have driven down risk. And I think that is such a huge area that we ought to explore later today. But as we move forward, hey, what are the trends that we ought to be looking for to make sure that this need continues to develop? What are the enabling things that will make sure that it's sustainable? Can you talk to that a little bit, please?
Yes, we pursue a path of very, very high specificity. So we have specific ship owners, specific reactors, specific trade, specific insurance companies, specific reactors, specific turbines, everything to take away all this, general discussions. And that high level of specificity allows us to find a concrete solution. Then, of course, the next step will be, could this concrete solution work for other applications? And, of course, we believe so. And we also believe that seeing is believing, that if we can get one out there, 2 ships, let's say 3, then I think a lot of people will see this is doable, and they will start to see, what if we now change a lot of these conventions that has basically hindered this kind of technology? And then I think we are on the right path. We can actually decarbonize shipping, but in the process, like the late, never mind his name, sorry. He wanted to do well by doing good. Meaning he wanted to do, Ray Anderson, that was his name, sorry. I knew him when I was doing my PhD in Atlanta decades ago. I think a lot of business owners really want to do environmentally good, but they also need to do economically well. And this offers an avenue that's credible.
That's excellent.
I can add to that, maybe.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so because I fully agree, and I also like to hook in on the cost aspect, because I think this will only fly if we can really be cost competitive with the alternatives. So in order to enable these developments and get it really going, we do need investments, both public and private. So and that's something that the Netherlands as a country now is also looking into, and that will really enable us to make speed, but also kicking it really off. And of course, here in the US, there is money from DOE, as I understand. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So Justice, from a perspective of a nation embarking on a nuclear journey, and it's a beautiful journey. What are the strategic considerations that you hold that can make floating nuclear power plants or other maritime nuclear applications more relevant compared to something that may be land-based or something a little bit more conventional?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think why this new technology will make a lot of sense for embarking countries, and let me speak more so for African countries, is a little bit obvious, because we don't have very strong economies. Most of our countries don't have a lot of dollars that they can pay for a nuclear project. And what we've had from this meeting is that we can look at nuclear energy as a product which can be purchased based on your economic ability, so that you don't have to look at it as a project that, if you don't have billions of dollars to build your own nuclear, you can still take advantage of this technology, because the flexibility that floating nuclear power plants offer. We could have a country with the technology, bring it to Africa, and then we buy it as a product. And also looking at the resources that are at most of our coastal towns, we are not able to exploit them because there's not sufficient electricity in those areas. And to make it more, there's the aspect of grid. We do not have very robust grids. And having these nuclear, floating nuclear power plants where they can be able to be available to provide electricity based on the infrastructure that's already available. I think that is a good promise, and that will allow us to be able to benefit from the nuclear technology. We heard about not waiting for 10 years, but you can, in 10 days, you can actually have nuclear energy being utilized by your system. Thank you.
That's excellent. So, if you forgive my paraphrasing, it really does feel like, hey, if someone from this audience per se, the next half decade or so can provide a ready-made solution that's able to connect into the existing infrastructure, that would be something that would be ideal for not just your country, but probably many others, right? There's a need. It'll enable certain growth, some opportunity that didn't previously exist. Perfect. Okay. And then Stephanie, back to you. Hey, so as the expert on offshore infrastructure, right? That question about new capabilities or new opportunities. From your experience, what would we do? What could you do with floating nuclear power plant? Maybe something. Is there a use case in there that'll open up a new market or new opportunities where it just would be too hard to get power otherwise?
Yes, definitely. So, in that sense, we're not married with either onshore or offshore or the floating power plants. I think everything should be possible and should also be equally interesting. So the floating nuclear power plants have, I think, a huge opportunity in developing countries, but also in countries like the Netherlands, where it's densely populated. We all suffer with grid congestion, and there is a huge growing demand of electricity, also due to data center developments. I think in that sense, like you say, it can really enable growth and then act as a temporary solution and then go on to another location. And perhaps from a licensing perspective, it's also slightly easier than the propulsion case. So it may as well be a good sort of first step.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I mean, that is an excellent perspective, right? So we talked about, use of, deployable or mobile nuclear power plants that we could deploy to regions that may not have the, sufficient infrastructure to develop. But, that's an excellent case where even in a well-developed country where, because of grid congestion, limitations of our own infrastructure, that these power plants could be a force multiplier and really unlock some capabilities and industries that we would not be able to unlock otherwise.
Yes, fully agree. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Hey, so we talked a lot about strategic drivers. We talked a lot about the increases in productivity and efficiency, de-risking other areas of fuel limitations, opportunities that we have for development and industry. Hey, what's at stake if we don't get this right in the next several years? So that question is for the group. Jan?
Yeah, I think then maritime industry will stay fossil. It's that simple.
Yeah.
But if you look at the bigger picture, I think what we really have a great opportunity in the maritime industry is that because there is one regulator on top, IMO, we actually have a chance of making grand-scale industrial with identical units and not have all the, in Europe we have a lot of countries and they all have slightly different rules and you need to adapt the facility from one country to another country. It's not like that on the high seas. So that means we could actually see a true industrialization of nuclear finding its way through the maritime industry. And if we're lucky, which I hope we will be, this will have a spillover effect into land-based nuclear.
Perfect.
Because, I mean, the physics is the same.
No, absolutely right. And I think you just summarized very crisply for the audience here why it's so important, like this project ATLAS. It really takes root that we have centralized leadership, and there's this shared mental model on what the regulatory framework, what the appropriate safeguards and safety structure needs to be. Great. All right. Hey, so moving on, just in the interest of time, our Our second theme deals with real-world demand and opportunities. I think we've touched on it a little bit, but if we could delve a little bit deeper in this next series to talk maybe a little bit more detailed into specific use cases or how they would how this technology would be applied to drive down risk. That'd be great. Hey, now that we've discussed that strategic rationale, right? David, hey, what is the perspective, as an energy consumer, the sort of characteristics that would make this energy solution worth serious investment and consideration, right?
Thank you for the question. For this to be worth serious investment, it has to be globally interoperable. So as a global buyer of transportation services, ultimately container shipping is a big part of our maritime consumption. We need something that is globally interoperable. It doesn't make sense, it won't make sense for the asset owners and operators who, is to the point that Jan made, these are long life assets. And so as these fleets are being replenished, those assets are going to be around for 20, 30 years. And so we need action from a regulatory standpoint to make sure that we've got something that is globally interoperable so that fleet owners will want to invest in these assets and they will bring them to bear so that they are interoperable in their network. Networks need to be fluid, and they need to be able to reposition assets across the globe, and having limitations on where vessels can actually operate will actually hinder the viability for asset owners and operators. And so I would tell you that that's the key thing that has to happen from a consumer standpoint is we need global interoperability.
Yeah. And David, I'm assuming that also involves port access, right?
100%.
Perfect. And I think that is, like if anyone in this room is familiar with naval reactors, they will highlight the importance of that port access, ability to pull into to just about any port that they need to to conduct their missions. In this case, it'll be trade. So really that unified framework is really integral to this discussion. Stephanie, for you, offshore or maritime applications appear most relevant when thinking about demand for energy solutions. Do you see this market niche, or excuse me, do you see this offshore maritime applications as a niche market, or is it a more broad one that could be applied?
Yeah, so of course it depends a bit on the speed at which this can be rolled out, and how easy the adoption go, and that will also determine strongly on the flexibility that ship owners have. Can they sail into ports? How many ports can they actually access? So in that sense, the level at which this will succeed and how big the market is will strongly be dependent on the ecosystem. So as said earlier, we did a market study and we looked mostly into container ships, bunker ships, and other transportation ships because they have a relatively high capacity factor. So from that point of view, it's the most interesting market. So that's a market of around 7,000 vessels, and then we assumed an adoption of around 10% of that. So we speak of 700 vessels. So it's an interesting size, and in that sense, once it's fully global, I think it will be a substantial portion.
Perfect. Yeah, so I really liked your use of the phrase capacity factor, right? Because we use the same phrase in terms of availability for nuclear power plants, right? I think it's important to make sure that we match those up. I think that is a very very integral discussion very early in the design phase. That if we don't match those two exactly, or at least provide additional capacity, then we may find ourselves short in this market. Virginia, for you, hey, where are you seeing the strongest signs of real world interest, right? What are the most prominent market developments among floating nuclear power plants, offshore industrial platforms, and nuclear propelled ships?
Well, in terms of the most prominent developments, I think it's important to start with the customer and the problem that the customer is looking to solve rather than being driven by the technology. And I think it's important to let the market the market tell us where nuclear should go first. I mean, Stephanie's talked quite a lot about offshore and FMPPs, and the ability to actually have energy where it is actually needed. We've seen that with the likes of ports. They're busy with ships, with cranes. They are busy with logistics. We've got AI, data centers, desalination, glass production. Essentially, ports are like utility companies. And it's a competitive market. They're trying to attract investment in their areas. And these ports, some of the licensing agreements, the 25-year licensing agreements, that works really, really well with nuclear, with some of those agreements. And you're also seeing with ports, they're very used to stakeholder engagement. These are big, noisy sort of industries. They're having to have the support of it's important they have the support of the community. And that sits quite well in terms of having FMPPs in ports. Remote industrial projects, how do you get these off the ground if you need huge demand for energy? And these sort of long-term reconstruction projects, whether it's a tsunami or an earthquake or global conflict, having FMPPs in place and the ability to actually put the energy where the demand is. I think we also need to talk about propulsion because longer term that's potentially a huge market, and that will change the fuel dynamics in terms of the range and the endurance and the speed of the shipping community. But I think we have to focus on the first successful applications where the customer is actually addressing a problem, and that is actually what will drive it. It's the economics and the fact that nuclear offers something that other alternatives can't offer.
Thank you. So Jan, I really liked your discussion, a few minutes ago concerning kind of this interplay between the different capacities and risks, in different industrial sectors. What do you think about the potential scale of this demand coming over the coming decades in terms of size and number of nuclear reactors, and also, how is that impacted by growth or demand signals in other sectors?
Oh, very good question. I think that if we get the economics working, then we have a typical lifespan of a ship, 20, 30 years, depending on what kind of cargo owners and rules and stuff they're sailing under. But if this really starts to make economic sense, I think this can happen relatively fast. And it will displace the older fossil fuel ships simply because it makes economic sense. Of course, which segments will come first and last is a big question, but I'm almost 100% sure that the segment that will come last is bulkers. And the reason for that is that they have the lowest capex. And to put a relatively new technology like nuclear reactors and stuff on a vessel with a low capex, that's a hard sell. So I think we're looking at some of the high-value shipping segments. Could be specialized ships like Stephanie here. Could be container ships where it might not actually be cheaper, but it may offer better value. We're also looking at the LNG carriers, simply because many of them are actually steam-powered today, so you have crew who actually know how to do this stuff. But they're also traveling between one industrial site to another industrial site, which is much easier to start with. And speed is a part of the value proposition, particularly when we run out of LNG in Europe. Then it's good that if there's a couple of fast-moving LNG carriers coming.
Perfect. And that discussion about cost versus value, I think resonates, throughout, the individuals on this panel. David, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you just a little bit to kind of elaborate on the value framework that you put in as you invest in nuclear. I really do want to get to Justice briefly, and have him explain what sort of types of national or regional needs could create a demand for floating nuclear power plants, other maritime applications, and in this part of the industry.
Thank you very much. I think for developing countries, you will appreciate that we have a lot of resources on the coasts. Right. Like Kenya has discovered some oil offshore, and therefore it will need a lot of energy to do the mining for that. We have a lot of food resources in the sea, the fish and so forth, but because of there not being enough electricity or power, they're not able to tap that. And looking at just the fisher folk who live around those areas, they get a lot of their the produce they get from the fishing spoiled. So estimates give it at between 40 and 50%. I think that is a lot of loss. And if we had sufficient electricity, that could be able to address these problems.
That is exceptional. Secretary Wright was just up here earlier today. He spoke about energy abundance as an enabler for quality of human life. And I think your explanation of how you could use this new technology, this new capability, to create this sense of food abundance, unlock new industry and a source of wealth for your country. I think that that's a noble goal that we should all get behind. So back to you, David. So we talked about value, right? Certainly there's a difference between cost and value, and you listed a number of things that you look for. From Amazon's perspective, right? Is there one or a few or a bin of those those priorities that you would put value above others?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think there's really three factors here. So Jan hit it. Speed does create value. When you think about it from an inventory standpoint, as an example, if you can more reliably move inventory into your network at a faster clip, that obviously reduces your inventory holding costs. And so value is created by speed. Value is created in replenishment. There's value that is created through cost certainty. Simply having a cost that you can plan to and consistently understand what that operating cost will be creates certainty in the supply chain as well. And then lastly, is the actual sustainable side of these things, which is super important, and that is the direct impact to the carbon footprint, and a significant reduction in your carbon footprint by utilizing a nuclear-propelled vessel versus the conventional fuels that we have today. So while cost is a key consideration in all of our purchasing decisions, we look to factor multiple things into that cost to drive the total value, if you will. And so it's our expectation that over time and development and investment, we should probably get pretty close to some levels of cost neutrality versus conventional means, plus drive these other factors of value into it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so I think we're getting short on time. I would like an opportunity to hear from all of you, and really, just a couple sentences on what success looks like for you in terms of maritime nuclear. It's my favorite question. I think it would be helpful for the group here to really understand, hey, what does winning look like in this sector, right? And in Justice, you've gone last this entire panel. If you could do us the courtesy of starting us off.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, what I will say is that starting with what ATLAS aims to achieve, it is good that the world community works together, just like it is done in the nuclear field, and integrating nuclear and maritime will require closer collaboration. The nations of the world need to put aside the politics and focus on how science and law can work to serve humanity. Thank you.
Perfect. Jan?
I think if we can manage two things, of course, safety, security, safeguard, that's taken for given, yeah. But if it can be commercially insured, and what was the other thing? Commercially insured and industrialized. If we can manage those two things, then I think the laws of business, so to speak, will take this further, and you have a cost reduction, you have a much higher value than cost, and this will start to be a snowball rolling by itself.
Perfect. Thank you. Virginia?
Thank you. I think it's quite straightforward, and I think I'd like people in the audience today to go home and remember that maritime nuclear could transform. It could transform how we power global trade. This is enormous. And not only that, it's an opportunity to get energy where energy is needed. So for all of us in this room, this is an opportunity to put an industry together, to do that with safety, and we need to do that together. That's really important.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, so I fully agree with what was said before, and of course, indeed, safety, security, safeguards need to be assured. We need to do it diligently. And of course, being ambitious, for us, success is also to be in the waters in 2032. So that's pretty soon. So, for us, the progress is important. So, run a diligent process, but run it efficiently so that we can really get this going and, have the benefits from this opportunity. So it's, of course, huge benefits for the maritime industry, but for the world as a whole because of the impact we can make with carbon emissions. So 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions is equal to the 6th largest country. So it is significant, and the difference we can make is huge. So I think for the world, this is really a game changer. And then also for the industry, it also, there's an opportunity for countries to, strengthen their maritime industry, to also strengthen their ports, be future-proof, improve energy security. So it's really time to really grasp those opportunities. So for me, success looks like, getting it really going and making sure we run this efficiently all together without giving in on, the diligent process that we all need to run to ensure the safety, security, and safeguards that are so important.
Thank you. David?
So I think success from our lens and from probably everybody's lens is seeing global cooperation to bring the value that we've all been discussing here to bear. It was really interesting earlier today to hear the speaker from Germany talk about that they were operating a vessel in the 60s, and they had a program operating, but they ultimately had to shut it down because it wasn't globally interoperable. And that's the reality of where we're at today. There's an emerging technology, there's consumer demand, there is viability to impact carbon emissions. There's viability to create a product and service that can operate at high quality, high efficiency, and reliability. But we ultimately need global cooperation to bring that to bear. And so I would define success as seeing global cooperation bring that all to bear.
Perfect. Thank you. So, as we draw this panel to a close, I think we've heard, several major themes, come to fruition. It's not just about the technology. I think technology and engineering, I think those things we can get there, right? That's investment, that's time, that's technical know-how. But, there's a lot of other, competing interests, right? Cost is a factor, but it's not the only factor. It's the value structure that it could bring and, and capabilities in terms of opportunities, developmental, potential impact on human, human well-being and security. So I think, it frames the discussion on why nuclear maritime is so important, not just for shipping, not just for floating nuclear power plants, but all of the above, right? and the conversation, just recently heard, right, is it's transformative, right? And the way that we ought to look at this isn't, hey, what are the need statements that we need to answer today, but and not just where energy should be, but also where energy should be, going into the future, right? What sort of things should we use this energy to enable? So, you've heard several variations of what success will look like at different timescales. That itself, I think, is a call to action. One, I hope will help set the stage for the follow-on discussions today. That concludes this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our moderator and distinguished panelists for a thought-provoking discussion. Please bear with us while we quickly transition to our next panel. Okay, so we will now turn to another essential dimension of this conversation, an examination of the challenges that must be addressed before nuclear maritime technologies can be deployed at scale. This panel is called Enabling Maritime Deployment, Law, Regulation, Safety, Security, and Safeguards and Liability at Sea. And I would like to welcome the panel to the stage. I hope. To guide us through this discussion, it is my pleasure to welcome our moderator, Mr. Mike Finnerty, Chief Executive and Chief Nuclear Inspector of the United Kingdom's Office for Nuclear Regulation. Mike Finnerty has over 30 years' experience in the UK's civil and defence nuclear industry. He began his career in the late 80s as a nuclear safety analyst. He joined the UK's regulator in 2003 as a nuclear safety inspector, specialising in criticality safety assessments, and remained at ONR for 21 years, influencing improvements in safety and security both domestically and internationally, whether as a site inspector or in senior roles. Prior to rejoining ONR, Mike was a special assistant to IAEA DG Grossi for nuclear safety, security and safeguards, playing a crucial role in developing the concept for the ATLAS initiative. Mike, the floor is yours.
Lovely. Thanks, Sinead, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, I'm really excited and honoured, actually, to moderate this panel today. I'm sure we've got a really interesting discussion ahead of us. I'll introduce the panel in a moment, but I just thought I'd just say a few words from my perspective, first of all. So, as Sinead said, I worked for the agency for about a year and a half or so, and 2 years ago, I accompanied the Director General to a meeting of Lloyd's Register in London, their advisory board. And from that meeting, we could see there was a real significant momentum behind shipping industry, looking at alternative fuels, but specifically nuclear. You could see that actually there was an interest both in floating nuclear power plants, but also actually ships powered by nuclear. And following this meeting, the Director General asked me, he said, what do you think? And I said, we need to be ahead of the curve here. You could see there was clearly momentum gathering, and I said the agency needs to be ahead of the curve. And from those discussions, ATLAS was born. So, it's been mentioned a number of times. It was clear that the input from regulators, from port authorities, from classification bodies, from insurers, etc., this was a really complex landscape. And so the idea for ATLAS was that this creates a framework, technology neutral, but a framework to bring together the various conventions, regulations, and requirements that if a shipping organization, for example, was keen to deploy nuclear, it would know how to do it. It would know who to go to speak to be able to take this forward. And that was the whole idea about ATLAS. Now, ATLAS, this was 2 years ago, these conversations happened. ATLAS, under the leadership of Director General, has been taken forward through IAEA and in collaboration with IMO. But a few points that I'll just make, I think, from my, my very early observations, really, about ATLAS and some of the things that I still feel is a real requirement for this work going forward. First one for me is some of the documentation that supports ATLAS. So, for example, a safety justification. I think it's really important that if you have a safety justification for a particular technology, this is done once, repeated many times. What we absolutely can't do is, this will be so inefficient, is if you have a safety justification, it is repeated by different regulators, and used separately by classification bodies, by IMO, and that will just create a situation where we won't get movement at all. So it's very much the case of actually one assessment repeated many times. The other thing is replication. I've heard a number of times that, look, actually, one of the things about ATLAS is economies of scale, actually. And so I think replication is a really key point. And this is for regulators and for other authorities to actually work with the industry to enable replication to happen. If this does work, and we do indeed get replication, I think that actually this has got the potential to really drive particularly the SMR market, where we'll actually have lots of SMRs, similar, absolutely the same design, replicated a number of times. This will enhance the supply chain, etc., etc. So there's real benefits from this. And then just a third and final point I'll make is this is about mindset. So, we've heard a lot over this morning all about the ATLAS framework, what it entails, about actually how it will operate in terms of, the arrangements and things. These will all need to be worked up. But the one thing that I haven't heard yet, and I think this is a really, really important point, is actually this cultural aspect, the mindset. I think it's for all of us, for regulators, for industry, for classification bodies, insurers, to understand that actually this is different. We need to actually do things differently if this is to be taken forward. And that cultural piece is so important. Because I think if we don't get that right, I think we will, some of the old ways of doing things, things that take far too long to deliver, being risk averse, etc., all of these things, I think they will hold back this really exciting project. So I think it's, I think this cultural piece is really important, and I think it's for all of us to work together to ensure that actually we do generate the right culture. So that's just a few points from myself, but that's enough from me. We've got a great panel here, and it's, and the panel will talk through some of the key aspects of ATLAS that need to be addressed to be taken forward. So my very first panelist, this is Mr. Masood Karim, who's Deputy Director of the Maritime Safety Division at International Maritime Organization, IMO. So Masood, he leads the work on marine technology, ship design and construction, ship systems and equipment, and the carriage of cargoes and containers. Mr. Karim is a chartered engineer and chartered marine engineer, with more than 3 decades of maritime experience. He's worked across seagoing engineering, classification, flag state regulation, maritime safety and security, and international maritime policy. Prior to joining the IMO, Mr. Karim headed the Maritime Security and Maritime Labour Convention branch of the UK Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. His extensive experience in developing and implementing international maritime regulations, together with his work on emerging maritime technologies, provides valuable insight into the regulatory and safety considerations associated with nuclear-powered shipping. So first of all, Mr. Karim, I'd invite you to take the floor and give your first impressions of the whole ATLAS project.
Thank you, Chair. The first impression, actually, why I am here. Excellencies, in the morning you have mentioned IMO several times. I think that's the reason I am here. And there is requirement that both the organization, IMO and IAEA, should work together to make it happen. That's the reason I am here in the morning. It's a pleasure to join this launch event here, and from IMO perspective, to make it happen, this ATLAS to work, I think both the organization, IAEA and IMO, requires to start working from the outset on the development of nuclear technologies for shipping operation. IMO welcomes this initiative, and we see ATLAS and the ongoing IMO work to revise the regulatory framework for nuclear power ships as complementing, not competing efforts. Neither organization can, on its own, provide the complete framework needed for safe, secure, and sustainable deployment of nuclear technology at sea. In broad terms, the IAEA addresses the safety, security, and safeguards of the nuclear installation, while IMO addresses the ship, seafarer, its operation, and its interaction with the maritime environment. A nuclear power ship therefore requires both nuclear licensing and compliance with international safety, security, and environmental requirements. But it is important to stress that reactor on board cannot be considered as a black box inside a conventional ship. I think we should keep in our consideration whatever we do for ATLAS project. A nuclear power ship is an integrated system: structural protection, stability, survivability, emergency system, emergency preparedness, radiological monitoring, crew competence, and port interface all form part of the overall safety case. This is why the revision of the IMO nuclear code already underway. With the support from IAEA, the code is set to be revised by 2030, and that's the intention or expectation from the IMO, and it is already undergoing under the Ship Design and Construction Subcommittee of IMO, and we're getting support from member states, IAEA, and international organizations. Another aspect I should bring it in, we want to achieve net zero framework by 2050. We want to make our global shipping carbon neutral by 2050. To make it happen, we are working in IMO for different alternative fuels and technologies, and this is one of the technology we are working on, that nuclear power, nuclear energy can make our shipping to achieve or enable our expectation to achieve this net zero goal. And with that, I think I welcome this initiative, and if both the organization works together, our member states, IMO member states, as well as IAEA member states, work together, we can make it happen. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Masood. Okay, so our next panelist, Ms. Stephanie Grunet-Bresson, Commissioner with the Authority for Nuclear Safety and Radiation Protection in France. So Stephanie is a naval officer and nuclear engineer who served since December 2023 as Commissioner on the board of the French Nuclear Safety and Radio Protection Authority, ASNR, on a 6-year mandate. During her career in the French Navy, she held a range of positions with a strong focus on nuclear safety and security, including service as a nuclear engineer aboard the nuclear-powered aircraft Charles de Gaulle, and responsibility for nuclear safety as part of the port of Toulon. She also served as head of staff responsible for commissioning new naval armaments and for delivering navigating licenses to French military ships, including nuclear-powered vessels. Her combined experience with French nuclear-powered ships and her current role within France's Nuclear Safety and Radiation Protection Authority give her a distinctive perspective on the safety and regulatory considerations associated with maritime applications of nuclear energy. Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. I must confess that I feel deeply connected to the maritime and nuclear topics, not only because of my experience in the Navy, but also because as my father used to storytell, I am supposed to have taken my first steps on board of the first French nuclear submarine, Le Redoutable. On these topics, I am convinced that most of the Western regulators are already ready to support any maritime project at a very early stage. As an example, I can explain that in May, the Western European Nuclear Regulators Association, WENRA, issued a statement calling for a robust, internationally consistent safety framework to assess new nuclear propulsion technologies for merchant ships. Especially the members of WENRA consider that, given the specific hazards of the maritime environment, all initiatives in this field will have to achieve the highest safety, security, and safeguards levels reasonably achievable. And they called also for the demonstration of a sufficient level of maturity of both design, safety cases, and licenses before a reactor could be licensed at sea. Another example of the maturity of the Western regulators is that because IMO's codes will be the transboundary regulatory framework for nuclear power ships, some European regulators, as ISNR, but also as INVS, Austuk, and so on, are already involved into the IMO's correspondence working group on the revision of the nuclear ship code and the Chapter 8 of the SOLAS code. And I think that IAEA has to be involved also in these IMO's working group to ensure that the renewed nuclear code is really, really deeply in line with the latest IAEA standards. In fact, we need that the revision of the code firmly establishes the safety objectives and then provide sufficiently comprehensive and detailed safety requirements to be used easily by any regulatory competent body to grant the ship's navigation licenses with a specific chosen technology. On the other side, for the floating nuclear power plants, the regulatory framework will be a national one, but based on IAEA standards, of course. And I think we must collectively work to adapt the existing standards to the specific maritime hazards. But having goal-based regulatory framework is not sufficient, because safety can be implemented at the end, but must be an inherent part of any nuclear project from the beginning. The truth is, an inherently safe project is a good industrial project. And so we need to establish early dialogues with any vendor to help them to implement safety from the beginning and to help us, the regulators, to get prepared to the new kinds of technologies or uses. For instance, in France, we have established kind of early processing process which is in fact a win-win and pathetic dialogue with vendors. And I think it is complementary to our regulatory frameworks, a really powerful tool to ensure safety in maritime projects. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Stephanie. So our next speaker, Humberto Moraes-Ruivo, who's the Superintendent of Agreements, Treaties and Technical Cooperation at the Brazilian Office of Naval Nuclear Regulation. This is the regulatory authority responsible for licensing and inspecting naval assets equipped with nuclear power plants. A senior mechanical engineer with advanced degrees in aeronautics and astronautics, international management and maritime policy and strategy, he has held senior positions across Brazil's nuclear and maritime sectors, including as Director of the Naval Agency for Nuclear Safety and Quality. He has also served in technical and leadership roles at the Ministry of Science and Technology and Indústrias Nucleares do Brasil, including in uranium enrichment and nuclear technology. His extensive experience across nuclear technology, maritime policy and naval nuclear regulation provides a valuable perspective for the regulatory and international institutional frameworks required for the development and operation of nuclear-powered maritime applications. Humberto, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mike. I hope to be able to explain in short words how we are preparing in Brazil to, in the near future, to receive this kind of ships with nuclear propulsion and floating nuclear power plants, and how we are preparing the regulatory framework for them. I start explaining that according to the Brazilian law, we have two authorities to deal with safety, nuclear safety in Brazil. One is the national authority, which is responsible for licensing and regulating any kind of nuclear facility on land for civilian and military facilities. And the other one is the institution where I work with, the Brazilian Office of Naval Nuclear Regulator, which is responsible for developing a regulatory framework and licensing every types of ships with nuclear reactors on board, no matter whether they are used for propulsion or for power generation, civilian or commercial ships and floating nuclear power plants. And the Brazilian Office of Naval Nuclear Regulation is capable of analyzing nuclear safety and also naval safety or maritime safety simultaneously. This is not a capability which is available in most civilian and regulatory organizations worldwide. Moving to the naval dimension, I'd like to mention that nuclear reactors are used in submarines and warships for, as we know, for about 7 decades. And during this very long period, it became very clear that they have very interesting characteristics, operational characteristics, mainly due to the properties of the nuclear reactors and the nuclear propulsion. And they are also very safe, as we can see from the experience of these last decades. That's mainly because they use knowledges from the operational diving safety with submarine, and also from the culture of the nuclear safety. They joined together these two cultures, which is not very easy because they are very different, and then they got very good results. And almost all blue water navy in the world would like to have them in their fleet. The Brazilian Navy is one of these navies and is trying to develop its nuclear submarine for some years. And in 2018, a nuclear regulatory body was created to join the experience of more than 110 years operating conventional submarines, but with the diving culture, and also the experience of some decades in the national program for nuclear in different facilities for the full cycle and also nuclear power plants. And then this experience of the Brazilian Office of Naval Nuclear Regulator since 2024 has been developing a new regulatory framework to be used for the floating nuclear power plants and also for the ships with nuclear reactors, commercial ships with nuclear reactors. And I finished my first speech saying that the success of the naval nuclear safety propulsion strongly depends on the capability of the industry to deploy affordable, reliable, and safety small modular reactors that can be internationally licensed with an harmonized framework in initiatives similar to this one and also from IMO. Thanks, Mike.
Very good. Thank you, Umberto. Fully agree. Okay, so our next speaker, I'd like to present Dr. Matthew Napoli, who's Deputy Administrator for Defence Nuclear Non-Proliferation at the National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, in the United States. Previously, Matthew served as Executive Director of Foreign and Public Affairs for the US Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program, where he was responsible for strategic relationships and international engagements on naval nuclear propulsion, including with the United Kingdom, Australia, and Japan. During his tenure, he's helped expand US nuclear-powered warship access to international ports and supported coordination on nuclear policy and strategic communications. A former US Navy officer and engineer, he's also contributed to the design of major naval nuclear propulsion programs, including the Virginia-class submarine, Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carrier, and Columbia-class submarine. His combination of technical, operational, international, and policy experience provides a strong perspective on the strategic and international considerations associated with nuclear-powered maritime applications. Matthew, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, Mike. If I could just start by a bit of background and expounding upon what was previously said. I had the fortunate opportunity to grow up in our United States Navy, first as an engineer and then taking over foreign policy. But one reason that I want to highlight that is I had the opportunity to manage port access around the world. The United States Navy has access to over 150 ports in over 50 countries around the world. A similar technology, but fundamentally different in its mission and nature. The reason I highlight that is it is a North Star. That is what is possible if this is done properly. This technology is harnessed properly. And the Navy in the United States does that through safety, through security, and through environmental stewardship. And those are the guiding principles that has enabled that success. And I think that is what is truly possible in the future in this area. And I think that is why us getting together to discuss the ATLAS initiative is so incredibly important. I've since transitioned out of that, and now I'm at the National Nuclear Security Administration within the Department of Energy as the Deputy Administrator for Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation, serving under Administrator Williams, Secretary Wright, who was here earlier today, as well as President Trump. My main mission is to prevent our adversaries from acquiring nuclear and radiological weapons, but we have strong ties to the commercial endeavors as well. Our organization oversees our Civil 123 agreements on international nuclear cooperation, oversees nuclear technology export controls, and safeguards and security by design of future plants and existing plants in the United States, as well as working in issues such as proliferation resistance into these designs as well. I would be remiss if I didn't kind of pause here during my remarks and recognize the team at the National Nuclear Security Administration, the Department of Energy, and the State Department working in concert with the IAEA to organize this event. There are a lot of folks in the room, most of them I can see spread amongst the back wall here, who are the real magic makers and what was able to get this organization and this event off. So if I can just stop here and just give those guys a quick round of applause. This international body and the Atomic Energy Agency has a vast amount of experience in the nuclear sphere. What is different here with the ATLAS initiative is mobility. And that is going to create a lot of challenges and a lot of questions that we have to solve as an international body as we move forward in this endeavor. That's going to focus on governance. That's going to focus on security, and that's going to focus on safeguards. And those are just a few. But what I would really reinforce with this organization is to act with a sense of urgency. Industry, we had a great industry day yesterday, and they're ready to go, right? We have to stay ahead of that and not stifle the ingenuity and innovation that is taking place in our civil agreements and our civil organizations in industry right now. So I implore all of us to act with a sense of urgency as we try and establish this governance structure to address these major challenges as we move forward. There are three in particular that I'll just kind of note as we kick off the panel here. One is on security, safeguards, and then regulation. So from a security standpoint, there's a lot of conflicting and competing elements here. There is a flagged vessel and the responsibility and authorities that reside within that host nation. There is the visiting nation, the nation that is hosting a potential nuclear-propelled vessel, and the responsibilities that they have for securing that vessel and providing all ample necessary services. On the safeguard side, the same is true. It is about working with the International Atomic Energy Agency to make sure that that material is safeguarded throughout its entire life cycle. That is more than a ship at sea. That is a ship being designed. That is at sea. That is any refuelings that take place, and then its ultimate disposal on the back end and taking care of spent nuclear fuel on the back end. It is an entire life cycle that must be well understood and incorporated by design from the beginning, right? This is not something that's going to be added on to at the very end. And we have to do that while respecting the fundamentals and the fundamental structure of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and making sure that these two things can act in concert as the agency continues to execute its mission. Lastly, I'll note regulation. There are strong nuclear regulations that are enforced on a day-to-day basis across this planet and safeguarded by the agency and the mission that they accomplish. On the IMO side of the house, there's also naval regulations that are adhered to internationally and domestically in all our different countries around the world. Those two bodies have to work in concert. I don't think we need to invent an entirely new system here, but those two organizations have to be respected and work interoperably as we move forward. And I think those things, security, safeguards, and regulatory, those are just a few of the elements that really exemplifies the ATLAS endeavor and what we are seeking to accomplish to enable this moving forward so that we get it right. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Matthew. And finally, we'll come to Mr. Dominic Kieran. Dominic is Non-Executive Director of Nuclear Risk Insurers, been appointed in March of this year, and also Global Managing Director of Cameco UK Limited. Dominic's had more than 25 years of experience in the nuclear industry. He brings expertise spanning the full nuclear life cycle, from new build and operations to decommissioning, as well as extensive leadership experience across the nuclear supply chain. Prior to joining Cameco, he served as Chief Executive Officer of Babcock Nuclear and Managing Director of Cavendish Nuclear, and previously held senior leadership positions at Urenco, including Chief Commercial Officer. His extensive experience across the nuclear industry, together with his role with nuclear risk insurers, provides an important perspective on the commercial, liability, and risk considerations associated with the development and deployment of nuclear technologies, including nuclear transit. Dominic, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon to you all. So as Mike said, I'm representing NRI, Nuclear Risk Insurers, today. This is a 70-year-old company, previously called the British Nuclear Insurance Pool. What we do is we provide insurance for the world's terrestrial nuclear facilities. And this can be conventional insurance, but also nuclear risk insurance. Today, we insure 300 of the world's facilities around the globe. And on top of that, we insure a significant proportion of the world's nuclear fuel movements around the world. Now, it's that experience, those insights, that really has led us to have quite a significant conviction around this opportunity ahead of us, maritime nuclear. We're excited by it. We see a great opportunity. It's an opportunity we believe in as well. And our data tells us, if we look at carbon dioxide generation, I think 11% of the world's emissions come from shipping. That's 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide a year. And we heard earlier from one of the panels, this is a very difficult sector to decarbonize. And I certainly concluded from the previous panel, it's nuclear or nothing. So we have a very strong conviction that this is both the right thing to do and an exciting opportunity. Now, what about nuclear? Nuclear has a lot of very positive attributes. And actually, we're seeing on terrestrial nuclear, these really positive attributes are leading to the public, governments, stakeholders generally, including those that provide capital, really pivoting to support nuclear. And that wasn't necessarily the case, a decade ago. And its attributes such as energy security, zero emissions, safety, energy density, all of those attributes, when we look at the maritime applications, apply just as strongly as they do in sort of terrestrial. So with our conviction around this opportunity, our excitement around it, our view is we will together overcome any technical challenges that there are. And that in overcoming those, capital will exist to deploy this technology. What we actually see is probably more difficult than the technical challenges, or some of the comments my panelists have made, is how do we come together and put in place a global nuclear framework that's going to address many of the issues we've just mentioned. Safety, of course, but governance, working together, allocation of risk. As an insurance company, we think a lot about allocation of risk. So challenges, but definitely challenges we can overcome. And I should just say, we are very pleased to see the start of some forums, some bodies to help the industry come together and address these. We had Virginia up here on the previous panel representing NEMO as one example. And Mike, you mentioned Lloyd's of London coming together to try and address what's needed to bring nuclear to conventional shipping. So really, just in summary, a huge thank you to the IAEA for arranging this, and indeed all of your colleagues who have done a lot of the legwork. So thank you very much. Looking forward to the discussion.
Does this work? Oh, there we go. That's it. Good. Thanks very much, Dominic. And thanks to all the panelists for your excellent introductions, just illustrating just how complex ATLAS, or the challenge that ATLAS will face. But also as well, I think what is encouraging is that you all have although recognizing what how big the challenges are, all recognizing that, look, actually, by working together, we can actually overcome these. So I'll go into some questions, and hopefully these will unpick some of the how, I think, how ATLAS will work and how we can take it forward. So the first question, well, we've heard many times, haven't we, over today about the ATLAS project. It brings together two complex worlds: maritime regulation and nuclear safety, security, and safeguard. So my first question is in three parts. What are the most important steps needed to align these frameworks internationally? And where should organizations such as the IAEA and IMO focus first? And also, what needs to occur to ensure that the two frameworks work together? Masood, would you like to go first with this one?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I can go first. The thing is that this initiative, ATLAS initiative, the thing is that this is a very complex regulations we have to deal with, no doubt. Though we know that 1960s there was regulations for nuclear ships, but world has come several decades ahead. New technologies are available, new alternative fuels are available, and nuclear ships under two complementary regulatory regimes. One is under IAEA, another one is under IMO. We can't, one system, with this ATLAS, we can eliminate the regulatory requirement from other systems. So they require to work side by side, in parallel, towards the common goal. And that common goal is our nuclear ships, future nuclear ships, which is technologically sound, safe, secure, and environmental friendly. How we can achieve that? First of all, we require to both regulatory international organizations required to see their boundaries, where they require to work. At the earliest stage, we require to see the interfaces where we require to work together. And then also we have to consider the internationalness of this industry. If we talk about the nuclear power plant on land-based entity, then it's on within this country, but our nuclear ships will be going from port to port in different flag state, member states, different port. So international level, the ship has to be accepted by world communities. So we have to work towards that goal as well. And we should do it right from the beginning, not at the end. When the nuclear technology, nuclear ship is ready to go, we don't require to start working with the international framework of ships visit or going to the port. We have to start right from the beginning. I think these are the priorities on my side. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks, Masood. Stephanie, would you like to comment on the same question?
It's hard to explain to your question because what as the first step to achieve is very hard to say. I think the first thing we must recognize we need empathy between the different worlds because nuclear regulators don't know exactly maritime safety, and specialists of a maritime world are rarely knowing all the tips of nuclear safety, security, and safeguards. And so we need, firstly, to have empathy and to make sure that IAEA and IMO are able to work together. I must confess that I know that IMO's codes and IAEA standards are very, very different in the way they are established and they are intended to be used. We must recognize that, but they don't need to be synchronous as long as they match. And to make them match, we must have IAEA experts into IMO's correspondence working groups. And we need some maritime experts from IMO and from all the maritime ecosystem into ATLAS PGs. Because as DG Grossi said this morning, I think each PG is a part of a puzzle, and we must assemble all the pieces to achieve our goal. Thank you.
Excellent, completely agree. Thanks, Stephanie. And finally, Matthew, would you like to have a go at that question as well, please?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to agree with a lot that was just said here, which I thought was very well said. Like at the end of the day, there are two different bodies, right? And each have their deep, deep knowledge and expertise in their respective areas. And these two worlds have to come together and work in concert and be interoperable. But I don't think they need to replace one another to any degree with an entirely new system. I think we need to maintain the swim lanes of both sides, on the nuclear side and the maritime organizational side of the house. They need to act interoperably as we move forward. And then we have to identify the gaps and then fill those gaps. And the best way to do that is to jump into it, right? And understand, tabletops and exercises about one step of the process to the next. And again, I'm going to stress the entirety of the life cycle of this technology, because you have a nuclear licensing and nuclear technology life cycle, and then you have an entire ship life cycle and the integration of those two things together. So we have to work to tabletop these things, put the two teams together, identify the gaps and fill the gaps, and focus on governance so that we can move this industry forward. That is ultimately, I think, the fastest and most efficient way that we can approach this problem.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Matthew. Okay, so let's move from international frameworks to the national level. So what should the relationship between maritime authorities and nuclear authorities look like in practice? And where do unclear roles and responsibilities or potential regulatory gaps, where does this create the greatest risk that could impact nuclear maritime projects? Humberto, I'll come to you first, if you'd like to ask that one, please.
Thanks, Mike. The Brazilian Office of Naval Nuclear Regulation understands that ensuring naval nuclear safety is a holistic process. These authorities, the Maritime Authority and the Naval Nuclear Regulatory Authority, must work very closely, and they have to take care of the development of their requirements. I think that the worst thing that may happen is that they could publish standards with conflicting requirements or with gaps. So when developing the safety analysis, we could have leaks or problems not solved. So they really must collaborate. We would also like to have an integrated licensing process with these both authorities working together in a cooperative way. However, respecting the competences of each other. I will try to explain what we are doing in Brazil. There in Brazil, the Brazilian Office of Naval Nuclear Regulator is responsible for the safety analysis of all type of hazards that can lead to nuclear accidents. Doesn't mind where the initiating event comes from, either from the nuclear side or from the naval side, or even the environment or the navigation risks. And the Maritime Authority is responsible for the navigation safety, the protection of life at sea, and the control of the environmental pollution. So they have different tasks and competencies. But we developed an agreement, a technical agreement, to very precisely define the tasks of each one. And I would say that in Brazil, this alignment between these authorities benefited by the fact that they both are under the command of the Navy, and they share the same safety culture. So I think it's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Humberto. Dominic, same question for you, please.
Yeah, thanks. Let me maybe just build on the point about safety, if I may. So back to the terrestrial nuclear industry has an incredible safety record, has done for 70 years. And that's been enabled and helped by the likes of IAEA, WANO, various other bodies. Really, really very successful. So I think what's really important is that has to be taken and be the cornerstone of what we're trying to do here with our project. And Mike, you'll know better than anybody, this is not necessarily about technologies, it's about human factors, operating environments, etc. So this is pretty holistic, but the terrestrial industry has quite frankly solved this, and as we heard Secretary Wright say this morning, the residual risk is actually very, very low in the industry. So we've done it terrestrially, we can do it here. Let me just one comment with my insurance hat on is, what does this mean when it comes to insurance and insurance is there for residual risks. Well, if you think about terrestrial nuclear, I said we insured 300 facilities. It's very clear who holds that risk. Very clear. It's the site licensee. When it comes to fuel, a little bit different because you can actually transfer the liability, but at all times it's totally clear who has it. I guess we mentioned earlier, a couple of the questions we will have to work through as an industry is where do those residual risks sit when it comes to maritime applications. We've heard about actually remote reactor operations on ships. So how do we deal with that? Is it the owner of the ship that holds risk? Is it the ship's flag where we leave it? What about the captain? What about his company? So questions to answer, but everything is solvable, is our view.
Excellent. Thanks, Dominic. And Stephanie, again, just if you could be brief, please, because we are running out of time, but same question for you, please.
Okay, to be brief, I can say that I agree with the other panelists on this question, but I must recognize that in France we benefit from the experience of the military ships. It must look awkward to talk about this because the warships are excluded from IMO's framework, but France has decided many years ago to deliver a navigating license to our military ships under a military authority. But the military authority benefits from the civilian flag state authorities that give advice and support and technical support, and from the nuclear regulator. So it is key to have the both regulatory bodies, flag state authority and nuclear regulator, working closely together. And I add one thing. I'm really convinced it is important to dialogue with the vendors at a very, very early stage to be sure that there isn't any misunderstood between all of the affect, because as it has been previously said, it is really a holistic topic. And so it's important to dialogue.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Stephanie. And I mean, this is coming out loud and clear already from all of the panelists, the importance of collaboration and having the right conversations at the right time as well. You know, and in many instances, it's those early engagements really important. Good, okay, well, let's turn to deployment now. So how can governments ensure safety, security, and safeguards by design in support of innovation and international use of nuclear technologies at sea? And what aspects need to be built in right from the very beginning? So Humberto, come to you first for that one, please.
Well, I will answer this question as a regulatory body. I am not mentioning financial aspects or things like that. So I have to return to the question of developing objective and precise regulatory framework and the international cooperation. I think that the governments must cooperate with initiatives such as NHSI, in IAEA, also ATLAS, and in the Maritime Safety Committee, in the correspondence group, in order to review the nuclear code and SOLAS Chapter 8, in order to achieve an internationally harmonized naval nuclear regulatory framework that could be applied to all these initiatives. And also, I would like to remember that one kind of support could be the help to the industrials, especially from the maritime sector, to better understand what is a licensing process for a ship with a nuclear reactor and how to deal with this licensing process. In other words, I think that the international collaboration is the key to the success of the returning of the nuclear reactors on board commercial ships.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Humberto. And Matthew, same question, please.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think you worded the question extremely well. Safety and security by design are extremely paramount as this technology moves forward. Within the Department of Energy and the National Nuclear Security Administration, we have programs like this already in place for new reactors that are coming online in the United States, and that is our NSTAR program, our RISE program, and our Proliferation Resistance PRO-X programs. Those are aimed at safeguards by design and security by design, but what is important there is that we conduct that business as far left in the process as possible. This is not an add-on or an afterthought, right? It's something that we build into the fundamentals of the design And we work with our industry partners to make sure that there is government involvement in that, to ensure that it's properly built in at a very early stage. And that should not be viewed as industry as a burden. That should be viewed as industry as an advantage, right? It makes the agency's job more easy as they continue to conduct this business. It will make port entry easier, and it will make licensing easier. And regulation. It's a win-win-win all the way above from the safeguards and security by design. So I implore every body here, as you consider that moving forward, to keep that in the forefront of your mind. I know that we are pressing the gas pedal extremely hard here in the United States to build that into the system from the get-go and the ground level.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Matthew. Okay, well, looking at trust and confidence, if you consider the main challenges related to liability, insurance, financial risk for nuclear technologies, what conditions are needed to create sufficient confidence amongst governments, investors, industry, and insurers in nuclear maritime deployment? So, Dominic, if you'd like to pick that one up, please.
Sure. So I can give you a fairly brief answer. So I can sum it all up by saying we need to maintain the social license that this industry has worked so hard to grow recently. We have struggled with it in the past. I think it's really strong at the moment. ATLAS can capitalize on that, but then also support it even more going forward. So social license is probably a summary of everything we need to do to maintain it.
It is, absolutely agree. Matthew, would you like to pick that one up as well?
I think you're an expert on this, right? So I don't need to contribute too much here, but what I would stress is reliability and consistency between different nations as we try and work towards models that are able to ensure this technology moving forward. I think consistency and repeatability and treating one another in the same from an entry standpoint is going to be very important as we move this endeavor forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Matthew. Okay, so I think we've got time for just one more question, and this is around public acceptance. So what's the approach that governments, industry, and involved international organizations should take in order to communicate broadly about the benefits of nuclear technologies at sea? And more specifically, how can safety and security efforts contribute to the public acceptance of nuclear technologies at sea? Masood, would you like to go with that one, please?
Thank you. I think the acceptance of the nuclear technology has to come from trust by the public, not by promotion. The promotion will not buy the trust from the public and the world community. That's the most important bit. And we have to be, right from the beginning, we have to be truthful, all the stakeholders in this journey, that we have to tell the safety, what we are going to implement, what is the safeguard, what is the risk, what is the benefit. That should be very clear to the public. We know nuclear technology is always seen as skeptical by the public. So we have to be very careful. And we should not pretend that this is a safe avenue only. We have to tell the risk and what safeguard we are putting in place. And that should start right from the beginning when we start this journey. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Masood. And finally, Stephanie, would you like to answer that one as well, please?
I think we all recognize that public acceptance is a key factor in the success of its initiatives. So we need, of course, an ambitious harmonization of safety requirements and criteria at an international level, but because only one single event could be devastating to acceptance. But building public acceptance requires to prove that the safety standards are internationally consistent and homogeneous and high enough with enough inspections and transparency to demonstrate that every licensee all over the world is fully committed in its maritime and nuclear safety responsibility. We must not forget that the licensees are must be priority committed into their responsibility. They have the responsibility. and in both maritime and nuclear. And it's a huge responsibility.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Stephanie. Good. Well, we've come to the end of my questions, but what I'd like to do, just go along the panel, just to give you, in very short response, to what are the main takeaways that you get, your final reflections from this discussion. So, yep, Masood, I'll start with you first. I'll go in order.
Thank you. I think if we want to achieve the net zero goal, then we should start about this alternative technology to use in shipping. This is the one. And second one, I should stress, the Maritime Administration as well as Nuclear Administration should work together to achieve this. And both the IAEA and IMO to function properly with their mandate, we require to do that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Masood. Stephanie?
I will repeat that I think the most important bit is to dialogue, and I'm very happy of this ATLAS forum, because ATLAS is a wonderful place where we could dialogue between regulators, flag state authorities, vendors, and all technical people involved into maritime projects. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephanie. Humberto?
Well, I think that it's very clear that naval nuclear propulsion is returning, mainly to meet the 2050 net zero targets, and also improve due to the new technologies in the small modular reactors. I would say that the industry is developing a considerable work to deliver to supply these modern ships with these new technologies, and those who can fulfill this challenge first may have market dominance in the nuclear maritime transportation.
Very good, thank you. Matthew, please.
I'm going to leave with a few thoughts here. One is on the cultural acceptance of transparency, safety, security, and environmental stewardship, and this must be at the core of our business. No nuclear puns intended there. That and the governance structure, and ensuring that as we work to put these two worlds together, that of maritime and that of nuclear, that there are clear lines of authority and responsibility, and that we can point at one organization or individual and say that they are responsible for those actions to be able to complete this and move forward.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, Dominic.
Yes, slightly different reflection. So, as somebody who loves to sail, I experience the smog, the smells, a lot of the downsides of conventional shipping. And there is nothing I see that will prevent us solving that, as we've discussed today. So I hope we're all going to walk out of here today feeling compelled that we should really go solve this problem and get on with it.
Quite right. Thanks very much, Dominic. Well, look, thanks to all of our panelists. I started off this discussion by saying just how complex ATLAS is likely to be. But I think, the way you've articulated how we can work together, and collaboration, really, really important. Really important to have the dialogue. But also, as well, I think outcome-focused. Let's all not forget what we're trying to do here. Sometimes I think it's very easy to have lots of discussions and forget about the goal that we're trying to achieve. So if we can do that, I've got every confidence that it will be successful. So thanks again for great discussion to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mike and to all our distinguished panelists for the wonderful discussion today. Colleagues, our next panel will shift the discussion from understanding challenges to exploring solutions and implementation. But before that, we're going to have a short break. So please have a half an hour break until 5 p.m. There are more beautiful refreshments in the foyer, and if you could come back to your seats just before 5, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Our program will resume shortly. Please take your seats.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for returning. I hope you enjoyed your break. Our final panel today focuses on making nuclear maritime happen, how ATLAS can support deployment. This discussion will examine the practical requirements for deployment, including infrastructure, stakeholder coordination, certification, investment, and international cooperation. So I would first like to invite the panel to take their seats. And I'm extremely pleased to invite our moderator, Mr. Mark Darley, Chief Operations Officer of Lloyd's Register, to lead the discussion today. Mark has spent his career at the intersection of maritime operations, assurance and innovation, helping industry navigate the introduction of new technologies in complex operating environments. As one of the world's leading classification societies, Lloyd's Register plays a critical role in translating emergency concepts into deployable solutions. Mark brings a unique perspective on what it takes to move from technological promise to practical implementation across the global maritime sector. Mark, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Sinead. And firstly, thanks to the IAEA for the opportunity to moderate this session. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back, and welcome to this, the third and final panel session that we have for you today. A bit like Mike Finnerty, the previous moderator, I just want to start with a personal reflection as well. Mike spoke about a meeting in our office in a wet and windy London 2 years ago with Director Grossi. And if we take that as the sort of the inception of the conversation of ATLAS, I think as an industry and many people in this room, we can be really proud of what's happened in those 2 years to get us to this, the ATLAS launch event that we're at today. And if, like me, you know, you've been in the sessions over the last 2 days, it's really turned into a lot of excitement. There's a lot of excitement in this room about now what we can achieve within maritime. Now, 2 years might sound like a long time, but as the introduction says, I work for an organization that has facilitated many technology transitions and implementations with the industry that helped bring the first LNG ship, the first hydrogen ship, the first nuclear ship into maritime. So this is the latest transition, and I can tell you that 2 years is actually like light speed compared to some of those previous transitions. So that excitement is palpable, and it's great to see within this room. But now really it's about how do we take that excitement and make nuclear in maritime happen. And that's the topic for this panel. And particularly how ATLAS and the ATLAS initiative can support. So through the course of this afternoon, we've been on our own journey as well. We've explored the why maritime nuclear applications are attracting attention. We've looked and discussed some of the what are the challenges that need to be addressed. And this panel really focuses now on the next question, and that's the how. As I say, how do we move from that excitement, from that interest, to practical implementation with the help now of the ATLAS initiative? So you can see joining me on stage, very much a distinguished and a diverse panel. And these panelists represent key parts of that deployment ecosystem. We've got colleagues from industry, from infrastructure providers, from operators, from classification societies, from technology providers, and organizations that are strategic stakeholders. So to give us the best opportunity to hear from this distinguished panel and the most amount of time, I'm actually going to briefly introduce them. Starting to my left here with Sang-Ming Park. Sang-Ming is the Senior Vice President and Head of the Green Energy Research Laboratory at HD Korea Shipbuilding and Offshore Engineering, or KSOE. KSOE is one of the world's leading shipbuilding organizations and sits at the center of many of the conversations about the future of advanced maritime technology. Mr. Park brings valuable perspectives on the design, the development of future ships, the shipbuilding capacity and capability that we need, and really the practical realities of integrating the nuclear technology into future maritime nuclear-powered ships. So welcome, Mr. Park. Sat next to Sang-Ming, we have Stefano Buono. Stefano is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Nucleo. That's a company developing fourth-generation lead-cooled fast reactor technology, including the TL40 reactor concept, tailored for commercial maritime propulsion. Now, in partnership with a number of shipbuilding companies, Nucleo is exploring how compact reactor technology could support the decarbonisation of large vessels by providing reliable, low-carbon power for maritime applications. Welcome, Stefano. Sat next to Stefano, we have Mikhail Bo. Mikhail is the founder and CEO of Core Power. If you were here yesterday, you would have heard Mikhail talk very passionately about his company, and it's a company that is one of the most visible advocates for civil nuclear applications in the maritime sector. Mikhail's worked with industry, with governments, with investors to really advance the commercial case for maritime nuclear technology. And Mikhail brings an entrepreneurial perspective on the markets, on the business models, on the investment, and really on the wider conditions that are needed to accelerate the deployment of nuclear in maritime. So welcome, Mikhail. Nice to have you here. Next to Mikhail, we have Huan Ping. Huan is the Secretary General for the China Atomic Energy Authority, or CAEA, and he represents a key national authority with responsibilities spanning nuclear policy and international cooperation. Mr. Huang brings a government and member state perspective to this discussion, and his insights will really help us to understand how national priorities and international engagement and long-term strategic planning can again really influence and accelerate the deployment of the decisions that we need to make. And finally, sat next to Huan Ping, we have Andrei Rozdestvin. And Andrei is the Director General of Rosatom Energy Projects. He's served as the Director General since 2022 and has more than 20 years of experience with Rosatom. As you probably heard earlier on today, Rosatom brings one of the most substantial bodies of experience in maritime nuclear applications, including the development and deployment of floating nuclear power projects. Andrei offers a practical perspective on project delivery and first-of-a-kind deployments, as well as some of the challenges associated with moving nuclear maritime concepts to operation. So welcome, Andrei. Pleasure to have you on the stage as well. Now, I really want to spend the next 50 minutes really split into three sections. We're going to start with a bit of a quick-fire round with section number one, and that's looking at, well, why are we here? Secondly, though, we want to look at, well, what needs to come together across the industry, across the stakeholders, and now with the ATLAS initiative launched. And then finally, third part is really about looking ahead and getting into some of that practical how in the very near term, hopefully feeding into some of the conversations we're going to have tomorrow, initiating the work streams and the working groups, but maybe looking a bit further down the line in terms of the how and the work of ATLAS and the work of some of the other stakeholders and parties that we have in the room today. But going back to that first section, and firstly, why are we here? And this is quite a simple and quite a direct question that I want to pose to everybody on the panel, and that's really what motivates your organisations to invest time and resource in maritime nuclear applications. And maybe Sang-Ming, if I can start with you, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, friends, and thank you, colleagues from shipbuilding industry and the maritime industry. It's a great honor to be here with you and with such a distinguished expert on the same stage. It's my great honor. I'm Sang-Min Park, and I'm from HTD KSOE, the shipbuilding company. And my background is shipbuilding, not nuclear. So today, I'd like to share my perspective from the shipbuilding side. And simply put, we are investing in maritime nuclear so that I want to be ready before the market is ready. For the past 25 years of my career, I've been involved in developing new types of ship and new types of floating oil and gas plant. The more recently, I have worked on LNG, methanol, ammonia, and hydrogen powered vessels. And I have seen how new maritime markets are created and developed and how they grow over time. When we developed the LNG-fueled vessels, and then the IMO rule were not fully ready, and many people were concerned about that is too explosive and there is a fire risk. And for ammonia vessels, and many people worried about the toxic issue. And in fact, when we developed ammonia-fueled vessel in the past, then IMO prohibited the toxic ammonia substance as a marine fuel. That means our ammonia-fueled ship model then was illegal models. But now, today, ammonia-fueled and LNG-fueled vessels are already fully commercialized, and the hydrogen-fueled vessel is moving toward the commercialized stage. And now many people ask me again, why is the shipbuilding company interested in the maritime nuclear? So my answer is the same. The new industry rarely starts when everything is ready. They usually start when the industry begins preparing for the future need. I know, of course, maritime nuclear is much more complex than my previous experience of the alternative fuels. I understand. And recently, we have worked on maritime nuclear with the major classification society and the research institute and the reactor licensor and the university in US. Through this discussion, I came to believe one thing: the maritime nuclear is not just the R&D topic. It can become one of the options of the marine application. As many of you are already aware, that Korea has a very strong industrial foundation and the capability in both maritime, the shipbuilding industry, and the nuclear, the energy. We have the world-class nuclear engineering company, such as KEPCO, ENC, and their Bandi SMR, and Research Center Kerry, and the KMSR, they're still under development, and the Hyundai ENC with strong project experience on nuclear. And HD Hyundai can help bring this capability together for maritime nuclear. So nobody knows exactly when that nuclear market will be ready, but we are, if we wait until everything is clear, it is really, it is too late for a shipbuilder to prepare it. So we are preparing today for future need, not waiting. That is my answer to the first question.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you
So
very much.
about getting ahead of the conversation for what the market and your customers will need. So, Stefano, the same question to you as founder and CEO of Nucleo then. What motivates you to invest time and resources?
I would say a couple of reasons. The first one, we are a relatively young company, 5 years old. And when we incorporate the company, we raised a lot of money, hundreds of million euros. And we had a lot of shareholders. Among our shareholders, there are many people who's in the shipping industry. So as soon as they invested into the company, they started to question us about the idea, what was our position with respect to the idea of using nuclear power in the shipping industry. And I realized that 5 years ago, that was almost an obsession, in the sense that the shipping industry needed to decarbonize, and many operators of ships, they didn't find a good solution for that, and nuclear looked very reasonable to them. The second reason is that we have a technology that is very suitable for marine application. We cool our nuclear reactor with liquid lead, and actually this technology was born on the sea, because it was a Russian technology that was deployed during the Cold War in nuclear submarines. We believe this technology is very safe. That's why we fall in love with liquid lead cooling already from the 90s. And we think it's very safe. The Russian deployed this technology maybe for a different reason, for the performance. These submarines were the fastest ever built, probably, and they were very compact. That's why maybe they were also very performing. And having a compact system is very good for a ship, but also for the economics. So we hope that the fact that we can build a compact reactors for the nuclear will reflect also on the economics. But what is more important is the safety. We can build reactors with liquid lead that have inherent safety, so no possibility to make nuclear accidents like the one in the past. But panel one, remember that this machine can sink. So you have to be safe also if you sink, and I think we have built a design that is really, really proof for that. So we really, in the event of a sinking, a lead reactor can become a block of solid lead that will not release any radioactivity, and can make it potentially in a cheap way. So these are the main reason. The responsibility to have a technology that is very deployable on the sea, and also a lot of requests. And some requests translated into partnership. So we start to work with Fincantieri for powering nuclear ships, but also with Saipem, another Italian company that is specialized in oil and gas platforms. And we are working on both, so the propulsion and the nuclear platform. And today we announced also a partnership with a French group of people. So the interest is very wide, and we are very happy to contribute to the progress of this field.
Yeah, thanks, Stefano. So you've seen an increase in commercial opportunities for the technology that you've had, as you say, for the last 5 years. Now, moving to Mikhail. Mikhail, somebody who has been, as I say, a strong advocate, I think since 2018 at least, when the IMO launched its ambitions for decarbonising maritime, and has sat and stood on many panels like this. So, Mikhail, what really motivates you to continue to sort of invest your time and resource in maritime nuclear applications, please?
Well, Mark, I think the short answer to that is that there's an incredibly building momentum behind this, right? And that wasn't the case back then. So I've spent 25 years in commercial shipping. Before I started Core Power, I was working as a chief risk officer of a large stock-listed shipping company in New York when I suddenly realized that we were sailing into a very uncertain future with these new carbon emission rules that were coming in. Started to think about what it was that what we could do. And it dawned on me that it had to be nuclear. It was one of those oh no moments. And then recognizing pretty early on that in order to get this started, we had to build a market, right? There wasn't a market. There is a market now, but there wasn't a market then. So we had to build a market. And it's a big global market. And there's a big global industry. It's an $8 trillion a year industry, the shipping industry, and it has a lot of resources. And going around and talking to people about potential for nuclear applications in ships or nuclear applications in floating applications offshore, etc., there was a lot of funny looks. People were going, really? Are you serious? You really going to do that? So I realized that what we had to do is we had to find a way of making everybody think differently about this. They weren't going to take their preconceived ideas about what nuclear was going to be, or what it was, or what they thought it was, or what their perception of it was going to be, and bring that into their daily lives and their work. You'd have to make them think differently about this technology. In a sense, what we had to do is we had to demystify nuclear for the shipping industry. And it's a really interesting journey that we've been on these years, because even at the IMO, where it started, right, when we're addressing the members of the IMO in plenary during MEPC and MSC, etc., and really trying to make them visualize that we were talking about fuels and we were talking about all sorts of technologies, but on the shelf at the back of the room, there was this little skull that was glowing in the dark that nobody wanted to touch because it was taboo and dangerous. And what we did was we reached out and we took it off the shelf and we put it on the table and with everything else. And we made everyone sort of look at nuclear in the context of everything else, not as an isolated thing. And it's remarkable how that logic and that logical argument that flows from that has really started to, excuse the word here, but proliferate across the industry. And now what we have is real momentum. So the reason why we keep on investing in this, because this is not just the market. This is a new era, not just for shipping, but for energy. And I think also, to be blunt, for humankind. This is the way we solve it. I said yesterday during my talk that we've set out to solve two big challenges. One of them is to break the iron law of mega projects. How do you turn the entire nuclear energy installation life cycle and management on its head and create something that allows you to move move the innovation through generations. You're not literally waiting 80 years before you replace your nuclear energy system. You're constantly moving it forward, like you would with aircraft and ships and et cetera, et cetera. And then on the propulsion side, it's really all of the things that flow from, that's been talked about so much today and spoke about yesterday, this idea that you could provide a superior benefits. Ships that sail circles around the conventional fleet are going to get the cargoes, right? Regardless of the cost. And that mission has been one that, we have been relentless, not just here in the United States, all over Europe, in Korea, in Japan, in Singapore, in shipping centers all over the world, even in Australia and South America, right? Talking about this and conveying that logic. So this all culminated this week, Mark, with, on Monday, us signing a landmark, historic landmark agreement with the US government, the US Department of Transportation, to develop the framework for the world's first public-private commercial maritime nuclear propulsion program, culminating after 7 years with a fleet of nuclear-powered ships developed with allied partners, Korea, Japan, Europe, etc., but flagged and operated from the United States, demonstrating to the world that we can move beyond demonstration of a single vessel, as we've seen before, into a fleet approach where you can amortize that cost across the fleet and demonstrate that you can actually do this economically and commercially. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I think is the start. So like a good marathon runner, you run the first 30 kilometers, That's the starting line. That's when you start running. This is the starting line at 30 kilometers.
Yeah, excellent, Mikhail. As you say, the conversation over those years has really come to us as an industry, and you and the team at Core Power, and as Virginia said as well, from NEMO, these are really exciting times to be in maritime, and to be part of the Atlas and the development of bringing nuclear, the opportunity to revolutionise the maritime industry. But more on that later. We'll turn now to Huang Ping. Juan, representing a national authority, if you can give us your perspective on what really motivates your organisation to dedicate those resources into maritime nuclear applications, please.
Well, thank you, Mark. And as you just introduced, my organization, China Atomic Energy Authority, is a government body, competent government authority for the development of the nuclear industry in China. In the background of global energy transition, there is a growing demand for low-carbon solutions in ocean-going shipping. Shipping nuclear power at sea offers distinct advantages. For example, high energy density, reliable and steady operation, I think making a viable pathway to address climate change and improve the efficiency of maritime transport. China follows closely the future promise of marine nuclear technology. That's because China implements green and low-carbon development policy. China has a big shipping industry. As you may know, the shipping industry accounts for around 3% of carbon emission globally. So my organization, overseeing the China's nuclear industry, is a statutory function for us to promote the use of nuclear technology in maritime transport to underpin the green and low-carbon transition in China. From a global governance perspective, maritime nuclear application is a transboundary issue. No single country can address such complex challenges. For example, cross-border regulation and liability delineation. And I think in-depth dialogue among all the countries is necessary to build consensus for development of maritime nuclear energy in a safe, secure, inclusive, and beneficial way. So I think that it is another important task for us, for my organization, to join the IAEA ATLAS initiatives. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Frank. And closing out our first section of why we're here, Andre, if I could just hear from you as well, and Rosatom desire to continue to invest time and resource in maritime nuclear applications, please.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this panel, and thanks for all distinguished guests who stayed till the last panel, in that beautiful venue room. Coming back to your question, motivation, our motivation is based on experience. And our experience motivates us and makes us believe that that's the future for the maritime applications. And everything started from necessity, because Russia, it's a big country with a long coastal line, but 20% of the territory in the polar circle and thermal frost, and you need icebreakers to supply cities and villages, and that region is very rich of natural resources, and you have to supply energy as well, to make different projects feasible. Then that experience actually lasts almost 70 years. We started for one icebreaker, then we had 4 several years ago. Now we have 8. 2 of them basically also built in Finland, I think, and they're still in operations. And that made us believe that we can use that experience in other applications, not only commercial nuclear ships, but also for idea of floating nuclear power plant came in our head. And in 2020, we connected to the grid first nuclear power plant, floating nuclear power plant, Akademik Lomonosov in Pevek, which is the northern port in Russian Chukotka, which is not far away from Alaska in the United States. And 5 years of successful operations, 1.5 billion of kilowatt hours. And that's a combined regime, Akademik Lomonosov supply not only electricity, but also heat to the district, to the port, to the city. And that was a proof of concept. And that proof of concept created certain market, as you said, Mikhail, and we felt very strong interest from mining industry, because in that zone you have a lot of deposits which were never explored because of the lack of infrastructure. And that floating NPP solution opened an opportunity window, and it was loved by the industrial mining companies because it can last the lifetime of the project, and it has predictable cost of electricity which it can use in their business model. Because for us it was an absolutely new business model based on power purchase agreement. For nuclear power plant it's quite not common thing. And now we're building 4 floating nuclear power plants to supply electricity for Baimsky deposit. It's a huge copper deposit in the north of Russia, and we talk with other company to do the same in Yakutia for gold miners. And that moved us from belief and hope, I'm talking about Akademik Lomonosov, to confidence. And now we are confident that in the specific markets, specific niches, floating nuclear power plant can be a good solution, specifically for isolated territory. And then we think, based exactly also on our experience, that it's a very good solution for embarking countries, where they have limited infrastructure, where they have limited resources. They don't have financial resources to build the whole nuclear industry. And it's a good start to train the people to understand what requirements exist in the nuclear industry and start their entrance to the so-called nuclear club. And that's what we need for decarbonization and for electrification of the whole world. That's my answer. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrei. So, as you say, what started as a necessity and gaining that experience, now building into looking at new opportunities and applications. But moving swiftly to the second segment, really now, in terms of what needs to come together. And, you know, we've heard that there is obviously valuable meaning and opportunity in nuclear development and deployment. But I want us with these questions to really focus on the practical implementation, thinking about ATLAS, thinking about the work streams, thinking about the international collaboration and the stakeholders that we've got into this room. I'm going to mix up the order a bit, just as you say, it is the end of the day, Andrei. So maybe starting with you, Stefano. You know, you bring a perspective from really the forefront of advanced nuclear innovation and the development, as I say, of that 4th generation or next generation nuclear technology. So looking ahead, what do you think will determine whether maritime nuclear applications move from just discussions to deployment at scale?
Well, at the beginning, I thought that the necessity of decarbonization would have been very important. Geopolitical situation creates other worries, so people is less interested in these arguments, but it's still there and it's important. I would say that by far the most important aspect is the economics, which is a common problem of all the nuclear industry. I think, it's true that population fear nuclear, etc. But if nuclear would have been a cheap source of energy, like the fossil fuel, it would have doubled much more than what is today. The good news is that from our perspective, I think that both nuclear propulsion and floating platforms can be economically viable and competitive, very competitive. So I think that this is an aspect that will contribute a lot to the success of in this field and is very key to achieve. So we have to stay economic in our projects. We have also to overcome the apparent complexity of the nuclear technology with respect to the maritime industry. There is a lot of interest, but people is lost when they are in front of the technology. I think that will be successful design because it's 80 years that we are developing nuclear reactors. So once we overcome this complexity that is felt by the general public, but also by the people who is not expert in nuclear, and the industry may really decide to make investment finally in this field. I think that we need this, and I hope it's coming soon. So these are, I would say, the most urgent things that we need, and of course regulation. I think this is the very last point. If we want to transform now a nuclear project into building one, we need to have a clear path for regulation. So I felicitate this initiative, among others, to go in this direction of clarity of rules.
Thanks. And just coming back to those opportunities, Sang-Ming, maybe if I can come to you next, because as you say, KSOE has been actively exploring nuclear-powered shipping concepts and working with many partners and foreseeing opportunities across maritime and nuclear sectors to prepare for the future deployment. So you spoke a bit about it before, Sang-Ming, but from shipbuilders' perspective, what are the most important pieces and partnerships that need to come together for international deployment to occur?
Okay, so the regulation, the safety, public confidence, everything is important. But from my experience, I want to emphasize the economics as well as from the different angle. Actually, the strong economics can resolve most of the concerning issue. This is natural. The customer will be more interested, and the investor will be more willing to invest, and the regulators and partners will have more reason to move together. I'd like to talk about economics in two ways. The first, we need to look at the total lifetime cost of the large-scale ships. When we compare maritime nuclear with the zero carbon fueled ships, such as green methanol ship, the nuclear ships may have the great advantages, especially for large-scale ships and the long-distance operation ships. For example, using very rough number, large green methanol-fueled ship may cost around $200 million. It is the capex, initial capex, but if the fuel cost around $100 million every year when used the green methanol, and the simple total cost over 25 years of the lifetime cost is almost $3 billion. So in that case, even if the nuclear ship costs $1 or $2 billion, is about 4 to 5 times expense than the conventional ship, it still have the chance to be the competitive. And the second, we must reduce the cost to build the ship. This is where the shipyard become very important. modern shipyard is not just a place where a ship is built. It is very highly optimized and organized and systematic production system. At HD Hyundai Yard, we deliver more than 100 large-scale vessels every year within the very limited space and the limited time. That scale is possible because the process is highly organized and repeatable. But if new and unfamiliar nuclear system is added without considering this production flow, it can break the optimized the process. The construction may become more complex and the schedule may be longer or already delayed. So from the shipyard perspective, that becomes a risk cost, and the risk cost become the higher ship price. So the nuclear company and shipbuilding company should not work separately. We should not design a reactor first and then try to put it into the ship later. We should design the ship and the reactor together from the beginning. That is why Hyundai recently started the reactor manufacturing business. And the final product is a ship, not reactor. So that is why the early international collaboration is so important. If we work together from the beginning stage, design stage, we can reduce the unnecessary complexity, the lower capex, protect the shipyard production flow, and make the first project easier to realize. So my answer is that the nuclear industry and the shipbuilding industry must work together as one international team from the beginning, the design stage. I think that is a practical way move from concept to real shift. Yeah.
No, thanks.
I think so. Yeah.
So partnerships driving progress. You spoke there a bit about the economics and the commercialization and potentially new commercial models. Mikhail, I don't know if you want to build on that, or if you see there's potentially one other important factor that might determine whether maritime applications achieve that widespread deployment from your perspective.
Well, Mark, I think Sang-Min's absolutely right. You need to integrate nuclear and the ship. It's the maritime supply chain that enables nuclear to do this. But I don't think this is as much factors that come into it as more fundamental things that need to be understood by a larger audience, right? So we have here two industries that I wouldn't say that they're at opposite ends of the spectrum of each other, but they're certainly at differentials when it comes to oversight. Nuclear is an extremely heavily oversighted industry, maritime not so much so. And we're bringing the two together. So there is a quality differential that needs to be covered here, right? So at the very center of this sits that contract of trust with the public that must be earned, and that's earned through quality in every single aspect of this. It's really important for us then to think about these factors of what might or might not happen. So we've approached this differently, Mark. We've approached this from the point of view that we will build a market, and we will build this market with customers. So Core Power is an organization that has shareholders that control over 5,000 large ships. So these are our customers, right? Now, when we enter into, when we've started years ago, the design of the floating nuclear power plant and the selection of the technologies to make sure we meet our energy customers' demands, it is not technology looking for a market, it's a market looking to solve very specific things. And this is a very big difference, right? If you're a technology looking for a market, you're going to be playing battleships, to use that phrase, with all of the factors that are going to be true for your particular technology. Approaching this differently and saying, let's build a market, let's build that customer base, let's build the ecosystem around that customer base, 360 degrees, right? Every single thing, workforce development, finance, civil liability, port access, shipyard development, all of the nuclear code gaps that are missing from maritime, all of the quality assurance that goes through the whole thing. Approaching it that way allows us to select the technologies that are required to meet those demands by those customers. So now what's happening is that we're looking at very specific contracting structures with large charterers. We're looking at contracting structures with energy companies, industrials, and, say, public sector type customers on the energy side. And that's being focused in a geographic region here in North America where we can build that infrastructure, that ecosystem that needs to be in place for the infrastructure for this to happen. That infrastructure is critical, right? So that's where Sangman's absolutely right. That's the yard and the reactor and the defueling, refueling operations and the training of the personnel that needs to work in this entire thing to make it safe so you can have that contract with the public. And that needs to be learned. And that's exactly what our colleagues in Russia have done, right? They've learned this the hard way by doing the hard pieces and building it one upon the other. Now, we have a unique position in the OECD, in a sense, that we can base this here in America. We can work with our partners in Korea, work with our partners in Japan, work with our partners in Europe to build an international supply chain out of this and to build an international market out of this. But it has to have that beating heart of quality. So in closing to this question, so I'm maybe answering a lot of other questions around this, but it's important because it's not a factor. It's an entire set of factors. And that critical thing there is it's an understanding. I think it's important for ATLAS, for the member states, for the organizations, for the industry that is going to be involved in ATLAS, that you familiarize yourself with the essential constitutional logic of what must be true for this to work. And it's not that hard, but I'm hearing a lot of confusion in the room about how complex this is going to be. Apply the essential, fundamental, constitutional logic to how you bring licensing into a flag state, how you bring safeguards into a flag state, how you bring export controls through this. And you'll see a molecular structure where you can filter your questions through and out on the other side, come very logical answers. And I think that's the key thing that we must achieve. And that's the big factor that's missing right now. It's that familiarity with the logic of how this all works.
I completely agree. And as we said before, leadership as well, coming to the conversation to stitch all that together. But Andre, coming back to you, you know, as you described, this is by no means something new for you and the Rosatom team. And as Mikhail says as well, I'm sure you've taken a lot of learning from the projects and some of the practical experience that you've had to date. But based on that experience then, what are some of the most important pieces from your perspective that need to come together for applications to be deployed internationally and operate across multiple countries and jurisdictions?
I have 5 pieces. 5. First, I can help repeating our mantra, 3S, safety, security, and safeguard. You know, we should never forget about that, and we should never compromise safety, security, safeguard. We just cannot do this. We should be thinking always about that. Second point is, based on our experience, we have to prepare a plan or roadmap between regulator and classification society. That's ATLAS about that. Without that, our project in Russia wouldn't happen because we have very comprehensive plan how our national register and national regulator work together, and they know who's doing what, and it reflects the whole life cycle of the project, starting from the shipyard, because you need to get a construction license. Then you have to organize regular assessments, regular control, according to the requirements and rules which exist in Russia. You know, we should be doing the same thing in the world, probably. Then operation license, and that's the regulator body responsibility. But part of that in operations and maintenance, you should be thinking about crew qualification and about nuclear training, because, you know, it's a very specific activity and the personnel should be ready, and it takes not months, years, you know, to prepare all these people. You know, they're dealing with nuclear industry, you know, they have to be compliant and responsible for what they are doing. Then port authorization. You should never remember that 4 commercial ships, Savannah, Otahan, Mutsu, and several more ports, they simply faced difficulties in entering ports because, some port administration, they didn't understand the safety case and the requirements, and they didn't manage to get into that. Then we, in Russia, authorized 18 ports now, for working with the nuclear ships. Then, on the industry level, you should be thinking about fuel. And our experience says we need industrial production and industrial policy to produce specific fuel for maritime applications. And we have that in line. And if we talk about fuel, we should be thinking about spent fuel policy and waste, as a Secretary of Energy mentioned during the launch. That question, it was never properly discussed, but that's a key question. What we're doing with the nuclear waste. And decommissioning of the ships. And we managed to decommission several icebreakers, and we know how to do that. It's not an easy one, and we should be thinking from the very beginning about that. That's number 2. And number 3, you have to establish a framework between your operator and local authorities. And you have to clearly determine operator liability, because without that, it's going to be quite difficult, for any operator to work in these circumstances. And as well, you have to put together responsibility of port in terms of safety case preparation and emergency plans, and it should be coordinated between operator and local administration. Then Stefano mentioned, that's number 4, economics. I think it's clear. Nuclear, it's not the cheapest source of energy. And you have to understand in your business model why your customer should be paying premium for that. And for us, for instance, it's a niche strategy market, but we believe with the economy of scale we can go beyond. And the most probably important, public trust, number 5. We have to work together with ATLAS, I think, on that field. And I mentioned difficulties to enter the port, and not necessarily it was related to the technical issues, but also society and port and local stakeholders weren't just simply not ready to accept nuclear ships in their ports. And if you are not accepted, you have to return. And that, without public trust, and that's probably the most important point, we cannot change that attitude which exists now in the world towards the nuclear energy. So let's think about public trust together, and that's ATLAS. I think it's absolutely important and useful instrument, to build the public trust. Let's make nuclear great again, together.
Thanks, Andrei. Lots of learning there. And last but not least, Mr. Huang, you spoke earlier about the predominantly under your authorization, that major domestic nuclear developments in China, working with active international engagement through the IAEA and other partnerships. But quickly, from your perspective, what do countries need to see before they are ready to support the international deployment of maritime nuclear applications?
Well, Mark, and I have the following observations. First and foremost, maritime nuclear energy cannot grow without a proven and robust industrial system. It expands nuclear energy, shipbuilding, marine engineering, and beyond, with a long industry trade and a wide range of stakeholders. Industrial infrastructure and operational experience is key to move the maritime nuclear energy from conceptual exploration to engineering and commercial deployment. And second, cross-industry collaboration. Maritime nuclear energy involves players across multiple sectors, whether in the construction and operation of nuclear power vessel projects or in practical maritime arrangement across borders, effective alignment and coordination across industries and stakeholders are indispensable. And third, we must address the practical challenges of cross-border operations. Maritime nuclear facility operates across multiple jurisdictions. There's practical issues in logistic support, operational alignment, and emergency response. All parties need to take an open, pragmatic approach and reach workable, on-the-ground consensus through multilateral dialogue. Last but not least, public acceptance. It is utmost important for maritime nuclear energy deployment. We must address public concern seriously to create a supportive social environment, to engage in active communication and outreach, and to foster an open, inclusive atmosphere for the development of the nuclear applications in the sea. Well, it is very glad to see the IAEA initiate the ATLAS initiative. It provides a vital multilateral platform for all these efforts. What we will do is to share ideas and exchange experience under this framework. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Frank. So final question, and just conscious of time, I'm going to have to ask you to be as brief as you can, but I'll be direct. And here we are at the ATLAS ministerial launch event. So looking ahead, where can the initiative of ATLAS make the greatest contribution in your eyes to turn interest in maritime nuclear application into tangible progress? And maybe Mikhail, if I start with you this time.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So this is our final comment, really, for the day, isn't it?
It's all we've got time for, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, I'll try and make it succinct then. So the expectation for us as a full-stack developer of nuclear maritime systems is that ATLAS, as it finally has come together, doesn't become an aftermarket add-on to two very established systems. We have the IMO, that's been around for, well, I mean, it's the second oldest profession in the world, so there must be, some history to it. IAEA is 80 years now. ATLAS mustn't become an aftermarket add-on in the sense that it's something that sort of floats over the top or between the two. It has to be anchored in the fundamental principles of why the IMO and the IAEA are there. And I'll give you an example, right? So you've got this, for nuclear propulsion, there's an example which says the responsibility of the operator is absolute. Therefore, the licensing authority that provides the license to the operator has to be in the jurisdiction of that nuclear licensing authority. So you extend the license onto the flag of the vessel. This is logical. We've spoken about this before. But you also, what you do is you take the flag state and you make it responsible in a different way than it is today by adding nuclear licensing to it. That increases the quality expectations in that flag to an incredible degree. You also add safeguards, the safeguards obligations, and you add the export controls, which dictate where you can go, who can operate it, and what you can, what kind of business you can do with it. So it fundamentally changes the foundations of how you deal with propulsion. Then if you wanted to take that to a second country, you would export the intellectual property to that country and go through licensing in that country. Now you're creating a bond between those countries, which is bound in the fundamental tenets of the IAEA on how you work together, whether that's between the United States and Japan or Korea or United Kingdom or whichever country it's going to be. You're creating a long-term bond running. In floating nuclear power, it's an important thing as well, because if you take floating nuclear power and you create a national asset and you expect to be able to take that to other countries as your own. So now I'm an American nuclear power plant operating in a different country as an American nuclear power plant. That's something that doesn't really follow the rules here, right? So we have to have this fundamental understanding that the rules have to be set fundamentally on how we create atoms for peace and not instruments of economic coercion, right? So the first order of business for ATLAS really ought to be a constitution, a list of 10 rules, if there are that many, that are absolutely true, that have to be absolutely true, that are anchored deep in the roots of the whole principle of the IMO and the principle of the IAEA, and that flow through to everything here. And I think that's important, and that's how we avoid this becoming an aftermarket add-on.
I think we just have our first input for tomorrow as well, Mikhail, so thanks for that. Quickly, Andre, you, and where's your head at in terms of ATLAS and the impact that it can make?
Listen, I prepared a list of 4 points, but I think, the most important is popularization. I think, look around, Wolford Astoria, beautiful room. And ATLAS is, I think, created, for popularization of the nuclear industry and nuclear solutions and attract investors and companies like Mikhail created 20 years ago, and probably time has come, to get even richer, probably, than we are now. And it's very important that ATLAS remove all the uncertainties which exist in that industry and build the trust of investors, because finally we need money, to realize our plans. And I remember in NESI initiative, which was created by IAEA regarding small modular reactor. First time, I met people from Google and from Microsoft, and we are talking about nuclear. And we should be doing the same thing. And ATLAS is ideal platform to attract different investors. And I think once we answer all the questions, we should have the same interesting event in inviting possible investors and end users of all these industries. That's the ATLAS mission, I guess.
Great. And from a shipbuilder perspective, KSOE, Sang-Ming, your excitement about ATLAS as an initiative?
We don't have much time to answer. I think the success of the ATLAS project should not be measured by the number of the regulation book. It cannot be measured by the thousands of pages of regulation. I think that it should be measured by the launch of the real project. So I hope the ATLAS work the modern regulation. Yeah. It's time over.
Keep it simple, but do it right. Stefano, quickly again, if I can.
I think what I like most of this initiative is the confidence that ATLAS can give maybe also to the investor community, as Andre was telling, but to the shipping industry. Because something we have not discussed enough, I think, in this meeting is that there is an incredible synergy that is going in the direction of improving the economics, which is the fact that if we work together properly, we can bring down the time of construction of new nuclear very, 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 very low. And this is very important because the investor looks at the time the capital is used, the cost of capital. And if you can reduce the building of a new power plant to a couple of years, regardless if it's the engine of a ship or if it's a nuclear floating power plant, I think this is maybe the biggest contribution you can give to the nuclear industry and to the cost of the nuclear power plant. So this is very important that the two words are approached by ATLAS.
Great. And last word from you, Huang, in terms of the ATLAS initiative and where you see it going.
Well, Mark, first, to create a regular platform for experience sharing, putting together the source and practical know-how among all the other countries to develop a unified set of standards for nuclear safety, security, and safeguards based on the current IAEA safety standards and security guidance, to giving member states a reference for their own policy making. And second, to create a multilateral coordination hub for the international organizations, such as the IAEA and the IMO, International Maritime Organization, to forge a coherent, shared approach to upgrade the international laws and conventions. And third, I think it is useful to provide some guidance for the capacity building and development of infrastructure for all the member states. For example, the IAEA this initiative can issue some guidance document or tech doc, just like the milestone for the nuclear power development for the member state, to guide all the member states in this area. Thank you.
Thanks, Wang. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, and just conscious of time, I think I'll wrap up very, very briefly. You know, finally, I think a consistent theme, we've covered a lot of ground there in the last hour or so, but a consistent theme really has been the importance of international collaboration. You know, many of the developments, many of the conversations transcend challenges and interfaces between organizations, between countries, between sectors, between technology and providers, but really with that collaboration, I'm sure that we can solve those challenges and with the support and guidance of ATLAS. So without further ado, I'd just like you to join me in thanking our panelists here today for what has been a very informative session. Thank you.
Thank you to Mark and all our distinguished panelists. So over the course of this afternoon, we have considered why maritime nuclear applications are receiving renewed attention, what enabling frameworks will be needed, and how the ATLAS initiative can support deployment. And this will bring us nicely to our closing remarks. But before I introduce our next speakers, I want to highlight some information for tomorrow. For those of you who are participating in the visit to the NS Savannah, please note the following arrangements. Please be at the 12th Street entrance of the Waldorf Astoria in good time tomorrow morning. Buses will leave at 8:30, so we kindly ask that you begin arriving from 8:15. Please bring your passports with you. These will be checked prior to boarding the bus. For those of you staying here, our plenary session tomorrow will start at 9 a.m. here in the same room. When the IAEA leads for the project groups will share the plans for each of the 6 project groups, followed by time for you all to participate in the discussions and give your feedback. With that information, it leads me to introduce our final speakers for their closing remarks. It's my pleasure first to invite Mr. Kyle Housefeit, Under-Secretary of Energy from the U.S. Department of Energy, to the podium for some remarks. Thank you, Under-Secretary.
Thank you. I heard the slogan that should stick, make maritime nuclear great again. I hope these last 2 days have set us down that pathway. I want to thank Director General Grassi, the ministers, heads of delegation, colleagues and friends. Thank you for dedicating your time, your resources to be here today to have these critical discussions. It's clear from the last panel that we know the opportunity is real. The industry is growing. We know the critical needs we've heard. I started off the event yesterday talking about everything we touch, the food we eat, the fuel we consume, the electronics many of us are using right now. They likely moved across the water on ships. This is an important industry with forecasts projecting growth of 30 to over 100% between now and 2050. And we know that the technology is here. Thanks to President Trump's EOs, we've heard a lot about regulation. We made it easier to start piloting new reactors. And because of that, there are now 5 new reactors that have gone critical in the United States in the last few months. First time in almost 50 years. The technology exists, the innovators are ready, but as you all know, the reactors alone will not solve this problem. The challenge is greater than one industry, and that's why it's so important that maritime and nuclear came together over the last 2 days. Solving the whole problem is not an option, it is critical. The life cycle, from where the fuel comes from, how we integrate the reactors with our ships, what it looks like to refuel. We heard it earlier. What do we do with the fuel after it's spent? Right? We have to consider the entirety of the opportunity if we want it to be successful and we want it to scale. Any new initiative that's successful has one thing in common. It's focused. Right? We need to focus on the highest impact, highest return, and we have to have a pathway to commerciality. Ultimately, beyond the technology, beyond the demonstrations, if we want this to move the needle and have an impact on global maritime, we must focus on commerciality and scale. We heard earlier two very mature industries. I did not know that IMO is the second oldest trade in the world. It's amazing to think about the history of these two industries. 75 years ago, we lit the first 4 light bulbs with a nuclear reactor. And today we're living in a nuclear renaissance. We're no longer waiting for it. It is here. It is real. And to move forward, we have to focus on the real problems. And that's why getting the people in the room to talk about that full life cycle, what the limitations could be, and how we respond to those limitations jointly, globally. 2 industries working together to solve one challenge. And you all have a tremendous influence on the future of this opportunity. So I encourage you to work with urgency, but work thoughtfully, because you will lay the groundwork. The people in this room will lay the groundwork for the global nuclear maritime industry for decades to come. Partnerships and dialogues are exactly how this problem set will advance into a set of solutions that unleash an incredible opportunity to power one of the most essential opportunities in the world. Moving our products to humans empowers better lives, whether it's fuel or food. Getting goods to humans will improve their lives. It'll extend their life expectancy. We've seen it over and over again. Humans with access to energy, access to food, access to the fundamental things that make life great will live longer lives. And shipping plays an absolutely essential role in doing that. Workshops, ministerials are great. Stay in nice hotels, eat great food, spend time with amazing humans. But now we're going to go away and we're going to start working. We've got 6 work groups in the ATLAS project. These will be critical. Stay engaged, ask questions, don't shy away from challenging the status quo, and please step up and contribute. Tomorrow, some of you will go visit the NS Savannah. Almost 60 years ago, this ship was introduced to the water, over 60 years ago. And it was an earlier generation of people trying to solve the same set of problems, but today we have a new list of potential solutions. I mentioned earlier the importance of focusing the efforts on the highest impact opportunities. Many of you know the history of the NS Savannah better than I ever will, but it was a blended use, right? They wanted cargo and people. And it was also developed before the shipping containers really took over how things were shipped across the globe. So a ship with a really great idea that showed what could be done did not succeed commercially. So again, I'll go back to the technology is here. The people that want to make it happen and know how to make it happen are here. And we must focus on making that commercial. So how do you take a promising technology and set of ideas and turn it into something that will last and make a difference? It's the collaboration amongst the people in this room, solving the full problem set that you've all been talking about for the past 2 days. So lean in, make it happen, and you'll have a great benefit on not only yourselves, your children, but your grandchildren. This will be a generational impact if we do it right. So it's a big calling. You're the right people to answer that calling. So with that, I want to thank Director General Grassi again, the IAEA, all of the great USG governments that are here, and our many friends and colleagues, heads of delegation from across the globe who traveled to be with us here today. It means a lot. I appreciate what you're doing. So over the last 2 days, you set the direction. In the next weeks, months, and years ahead, you're going to execute on it and have a great impact on the world. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Ms. Karine Hevio, IAEA Deputy Director General and Head of the Department of Nuclear Safety and Security, to the podium for closing remarks on behalf of the IAEA.
Thank you all for being with us today, and as I will close this first day of this ATLAS journey, I would like to thank our host, the US government and Department of Energy, and I would like to thank all of you for your active participation and your support to the IAEA ATLAS initiative. Ministers and head of delegation statements this morning have demonstrated the substantial interest in the ATLAS initiative, which has grown over time. Statements, as panel discussions this afternoon, have settled the high level of expectations, while pointing out some of the main challenges we will have to cope with altogether. It is time to unlock the potential of severe nuclear application at sea. And I think we all recognize that ATLAS is arriving precisely when technological progress, market forces, and global needs are converging. The development of the requested international framework to support the deployment of nuclear applications at sea will take some time, but be sure that the agency, the IAEA, is fully committed to actively coordinate the discussions at the international level with the support of the IMO. The work ahead of us is huge, but we are not starting from scratch. Decades of development of consensus formalized in the nuclear code for IMO and in IAEA safety standards, security guidance, and many other IAEA publications will be a strong foundation for our work ahead. But as discussed today, challenges exist at multiple levels, international but also national levels, and across many domains, legal, regulatory, and technical, spanning nuclear technology, nuclear safety, security, and safeguards. And this is what is making this initiative so exciting. ATLAS is designed to accelerate innovation responsibly. But most important, it is about creating the certainty needed to enable investment, deployment, and public confidence. Certainly to enable the development of liability regimes, and this may be one of the most difficult issues we have to deal with in the coming months and years. As mentioned by many of you already, ATLAS is not simply a technical initiative. It is a collaborative platform for all the stakeholders that must work together if nuclear applications at sea are to succeed. ATLAS will consist of several project groups dedicated to addressing specific topics. This group will be discussed in further detail tomorrow. While each group will focus on its area of expertise, their work will collectively contribute to a single integrated ATLAS framework. Once again, to conclude, I would like to thank you for your participation. Thanks our speakers, moderators, master of ceremonies. Thank our host, and thank the amazing IAEA teams that has prepared this lunch event, make it able to happen. I encourage you to get engaged in ATLAS activities and to benefit from the agencies and IMO's expertise and resources. I'm looking forward to working together, starting with tomorrow's discussions with some of you. I wish you all a nice evening. See you tomorrow. And for the one who has the chance to visit the NS Savannah, enjoy the visit. Thank you so much.
Dear colleagues, thank you all for joining us today and for your attention. I wish you all a pleasant evening, and for those of you who are going to the Savannah, have a great day, and the rest of you will see you back here for discussions and presentations of the project groups tomorrow. Thank you.